Good afternoon and welcome to the City Council budget hearings. The budget hearings will start in 60 seconds.
Thank you, everybody. Call to order the budget hearings for the City of Sioux Falls for the 2017 budget. Thank you all for being here. It looks like we're, I don't know whether it's the liberals on the left and the conservatives on the right, or if I turn around this way, it's the right, you know. Don't know which ways you are sitting, but we're a little out of balance here, but that's okay. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. Let's get started with the overview by Director Turbach.
Good afternoon. Tracy Turbach with the Finance Office. Thank you, Councilor Rolfing. As we have in the past, today I'll kick things off. As you know, we're going to have meetings this week and then the following 2 Tuesdays as well to review all of the proposed budget for 2017. I'll provide a high-level overview of the overall budget and focus somewhat on the general fund as well. That'll be followed up then with Bill O'Toole, who will review the personnel aspects of the budget, and Bill will be followed by Sue Kwan-Bacatin, then she'll review the central services. Our three teams really provide a lot of support to the other departments, and then following Sue's presentation, then to really get into the departmental presentations, our community development team is here to get that process started. And then over the next couple of weeks, the rest of our budgets will be presented by the directors as well. So with that, before I do get started, I do want to thank the other city directors and their budget teams as well. They've really done another wonderful job this year in working with us, collaborating with finance and with HR and with central services in the development of their proposed budgets for 2017. And I also want to thank, again, my finance team. We've really got an outstanding group of professionals in the finance office, and they really take this process seriously. They take their positions seriously, and they really serve the city with a lot of passion and a lot of dedication. So I really want to thank them and tip my hat to those folks who really do work very, very hard in putting together the budget as well as the presentations that you'll see over the next few weeks. So there are a lot of opportunities for the public to educate themselves, those that wish to, if they're incredibly looking for something to do and can have trouble sleeping or whatever the case might be. There are opportunities to really dig into the city budget. We have these presentations that we're here kicking off today. It's live streamed, of course, on the CityLink channels, and the budget documents are available on our website. And then in terms of public input, when we get closer to the end of the process, once you folks have had a chance to hear and see the budgets and the presentations, then in September there are a couple of different opportunities for the public to provide input as well outside of their normal methods that they might use in terms of contacting you folks and providing input to you as we go. As I always do, I'll start off with a review of the Sioux Falls economy. A lot of this information you've seen recently, so I won't spend much time on it. In a nutshell, of course, the Sioux Falls economy continues to do very well. We see very low unemployment continuing, strong construction activity again this year, which of course translates into a growing property tax base for the city. Other revenues are growing. We've talked a lot about sales taxes recently, that they are growing, not at the rate that we had anticipated, but they continue to grow. And one of the things that has benefited us for some time now is a low overall inflation, so we're not seeing a lot of inflation that would, of course, negatively impact the city budget. So that's kind of the backdrop. Unemployment, again, we've got a little bit of new information. The June numbers came out last week. Locally, we did tick up slightly, a couple tenths to 2.3%. You can see that we're still below where we were at this point in the last couple of years, so we continue to see very strong employment numbers. 2.3% compares to a state rate of 2.8 and a national rate of just over 5%. I mentioned construction activity. Again, we're seeing, and it's no surprise to anyone, a lot of construction activity around the community. The graphic here shows the green, the value of construction permitted through June of each year, and then the blue would be the second half of the year. So obviously we don't have the second half of 16 yet, but you can see that 2016 is again proving to be a very strong year. We're seeing particularly strong numbers in both new residential and commercial construction permits. The number of new residential units is up really across the board in all categories, single family, townhomes, as well as multifamily units. One interesting thing I think is that the value of remodels and additions that's being permitted is actually down compared to last year. Some have suggested to me that that's really a positive indicator, because when things are slow, we'll see a greater portion of permits issued for remodels and additions as opposed to actual new construction. So perhaps that is a good indicator. The July numbers have come out. They're not reflected on the graphic here, but the July numbers are year to date through July of 16 compared to 15 are just slightly behind where we were a year ago, about $12 million. So we're running close to, very close to that record rate of last year, and I'm confident by the end of the year we'll see 2016 as another very, very strong year with construction activity. Now, when Mike Cooper is here in a couple of weeks, he'll talk a little more in depth about what's going on in the development around the community. Of course, that construction activity is important. That does keep our property tax base growing. This graphic is a historical look at how our property tax revenues have grown over the past 10 years. In 2017, we're anticipating an increase over what was budgeted in 2016 of $1.3 million. The blue bars indicate the portion that we're allowed to increase, generate from inflationary adjustment to the tax rate. You can see in 2017 there is no blue bar reflected there. There is no consumer price index adjustment or inflationary adjustment that we'll be making to the tax rate, and that is dictated by state law, so it's really driven by actual inflationary data. That does not happen very often. You can see in the last 10 years, 2011 is the only other time that has occurred. The red portion is the growth. That's due to new construction or properties coming on the tax roll for the first time. So we do generate additional property tax revenues from those sources, and we've seen our overall property tax base in Sioux Falls grow over the last year at about 3.7%. The total property tax revenues for next year we're estimating at about $57.6 million. You'll see that again here in a little bit. And again, that represents about $1.3 million more than what was budgeted in 16. Quickly looking at sales tax, you've seen this graphic a couple times here recently, the rolling 12-month growth rate running at 4.1% through June. Entertainment tax at 6.5% over the last 12 months through June. So that's really the kind of this economic summary that provides the backdrop for our budget this year. I do want to talk just briefly about the budget process. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but the primary point is that the budget process really never ends. We start out with kind of a general overall idea of what it is we want to accomplish in the coming year. We then go to work early in the year, collaborating with the departments, our finance team. The collaboration between the two, the finance and the other departments, has really never been better. It's very, very strong relationships that we've developed, understanding the business that our departments are in. And so finance works with the departments to prepare that initial cut of the budget early in the year, looking at not just cost projections, but revenue projections, any sort of growth in their programming requirements, participation rates, those types of things. And we also engage HR in determining FTE needs. Then later on in the process, we meet with the mayor. Each department has an opportunity to sit down with the mayor, along with their analysts and the finance team, to review what we're proposing for their budget. Then we have start this process. The mayor, of course, presents the capital program and the operating budget to the council and the public. We then initiate the process we're here starting today with the individual departmental presentations. And then throughout the rest of the year, after the council has adopted the budget and the plan in September, then of course once the year begins, we continually monitor the progress in meeting our budget and tracking all the data, revenues and expenditures, as to how they compare with budget and the service delivery requirements of our individual departments, and continually monitor and measure that throughout the year. So, and then it's before we really end one cycle, the next cycle starts again. So it's really continuous, nonstop process. I do want to touch a little bit on something that we really haven't spent much time on the last couple of years, particularly with 4 new council members. If you've never been through a local governmental budget or observed the process before, it can be a little bit confusing. It's not like anything you will see typically in the private sector. The city's budget, like other cities around the country, and the state budget and county budgets, are all based on a fund accounting system. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we've got in terms of the Sioux Falls funds. A fund is essentially, from an accounting, budgeting, and financial reporting standpoint, it's a business all its own. And so with the City of Sioux Falls in the budget this year, you'll see 22 different funds presented in the 2017 budget. And each one of those 22 funds has a budget of its own. And at the end of the year, we'll have financial reports all its own, a balance sheet, and a revenue and expense statement. So it's really, for budgeting and accounting purposes, it's its own entity. Of course, the budget process that we go through really melds all that together. And we account for those funds in really one of 2 categories. We have appropriated funds and non-appropriated funds. In this case, in 2017, the budget reflects 10 appropriated funds. You'll see those on the left-hand part of the slide. The 10 appropriated funds are generally supported by tax dollars and other similar fees. There are some other revenues, but those are the primary funding sources for our appropriated funds. The 12 non-appropriated funds are generally supported by user charges or other contributions established by long-term rate models or that kind of thing, or driven by spending requirements. So the list on the slide, the general fund is far and away the largest fund that we have. That's where all of our general tax dollars go. Next, we have a group of 5 what we call special revenue funds, and you can tell by the title kind of the nature of the revenues that are going into those funds, and they're maintained in separate funds because those revenues are restricted and can only be used for certain purposes. So that's really creates the need to account for those in a separate fund, and so those budgets are laid out as you'll see in the budget book. We've got a tax increment financing fund, so any revenues coming in from TIFs go into that, and then the costs associated with those TIFs are paid out of that fund. Flood control fund, that is what I would identify as a temporary fund. Eventually that will go away. It was created when bonds were sold to take on the long-term flood control improvements in the community. And then we have a couple of very, very small funds that were created some years ago by gifts to the city, and they are identified for a very specific purpose. But you'll also see those identified in the budget book. The non-appropriated funds, as I mentioned, are made up of essentially operations that are supported by charges for the services that they're providing. You can see the first 5 there are what we call our 5 enterprise funds: water and water rec, our parking, landfill, and the electric light fund. So those are driven by user fees, and each one of those is treated and accounted for as a separate entity so that we can identify the cost of providing those services and ensure that rates are set at a level that will support the cost of providing those services. The next 5 there that are listed are internal service funds. Those are internal to the city and really provide services to the remaining city funds. For example, the city is self-insured for employee group health benefits, and so we've got a fund for that. The other funds that have employees pay, rather than paying a premium to a private insurance company, it's paid into that fund, and benefits are then paid out of that self-insurance fund. And you can see we've got several other internal service funds. You can tell by the name kind of what the nature of the business is. And then, of course, we have our 2 employee pension funds. So when all this budget process is concluded, then in September, it's really the council's ultimate role then is to adopt the budget and the 5-year capital plan, and that really takes place in 3 steps. There's a budget ordinance that will cover those appropriated funds, those that are legally limited as to the expenditures. A resolution is also adopted that covers all of our funds, including the non-appropriated funds, which are those budgets then are really management plans, and they are not subject to the same legal spending limitations as the appropriated funds are. And then the council also adopts the 5-year plan by resolution as well. So that's kind of my fund accounting, fund budgeting 101 for you today. Just a little more information on the dollar amounts associated with those appropriated funds. You can see the funds listed here, and as I mentioned, the general fund is by far the largest. All of the tax dollars that the city collects goes into one of these appropriated funds, whether it's property tax, first or second penny, sales tax, entertainment taxes, and similar fees that are assessed on property, frontage tax, that kind of thing, will go into one of those appropriated funds. The non-appropriated funds, as I mentioned, we've got 12 of those, and no tax dollars go directly into any of these non-appropriated funds. And again, these are generally supported by user fees and charges or contributions that are based on required service levels or required spending levels. I want to talk just a little bit about some of our priorities that we're focusing on. I don't think there'll be anything too surprising in any of this. At the outset of the budget process, early in the year, we did identify a number of priorities. And as you also know, earlier in the year, we clearly understood that the 2016 sales tax growth was slower than what had been expected. And as a result, I encouraged the directors and their budget teams to look at that as an opportunity to really strengthen how they do business, to become more efficient, to innovate in the ways that they deliver services and deploy the city resources. And I really think the budget achieves that objective, as well as the goals and priorities that are listed on the slide. So today and over the next couple of weeks, the directors, as I mentioned, will be in front of you to address the specifics of what is happening within their own individual budgets. And throughout the presentations, I think you'll see that these priorities are really truly the focus of our budget. In terms of maintaining the city's strong financial position, of course, I'm referring to managing our reserve levels around that 25% policy target. And as I've said to you on a number of occasions recently, that's a target. It's not a hard floor. That is a resource to be managed. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go forward. Certainly protecting the people of Sioux Falls is just a fundamental purpose or priority of the city. Chief Burns and Chief Sedaris will be here later in this process to inform you on what they're doing to make that a reality. As I mentioned, Bill O'Toole will be here later to talk about how we are investing in our city employees, in reviewing the personnel budget, and talk about some of the new positions that we're recommending for next year. All the directors really, in one fashion or another, play a role in taking care of what we have, rebuilding, repairing, and replacing, whether it's our city buildings, our park assets, infrastructure, our inventory of vehicles and equipment and so forth. Everyone really plays an important part in that. Next week, Don Kearney will be here to talk about the Parks and Rec budget and some of the quality of life services that they provide, particularly the Midco Aquatic Center that's of interest to everyone. Next year will be the first full year of operation for that facility. And then we really all play a role in, again, keeping up with the demands of a growing community. When we're adding 3,000 to 4,000 people a year, that does put continual pressure on departments to be more effective and more efficient to meet the needs of the public. Darren Ketchum and his team will be here later today to present how the affordable housing team, the economic development team, and the parking team are trying to address that priority. Next couple slides, or a few slides, I want to talk about the overall budget. This is a pie chart showing the overall expenditure budget of $466.6 million. You can see the utility services really represent the largest single slice of that pie. That's our 5 enterprise funds that I mentioned earlier, and that's a total of about $119.5 million. The next largest slice is highways and streets, and then public safety, which is really our police and fire departments. Culture and recreation, of course, makes a significant part of that. But when we roll all of those together, all those expenditures together, we total up to $466.6 million for 2017. The really 4 primary funds that make up the lion's share of that. The general fund I mentioned, that's also where most of the flexibility exists in terms of discretion on how those dollars are spent. In addition, our enterprise funds, that's the second area where we see a significant portion, about a quarter of all spending that the city will do next year is within our enterprise funds. And then our second penny sales tax represents the third major piece. Those 3 areas really account for about 75% of the total budget. So where does the money come from? This pie chart shows you that taxes clearly make up the single largest source of funding for the city. About 44 cents out of every dollar that the city will spend next year will come from taxes. That's really all sorts of taxes. There are first and second penny sales tax, property tax revenues, the entertainment tax, storm drainage assessments, frontage assessments, and then lodging and bid tax also are included in that 44%. Charges for services, as I'm sure you would expect, represent a significant part of our revenue stream as well. That's largely due to our enterprise funds and those services that are based on user fees for water and water reclamation services and so on. The next 2 slides will also provide a little bit different perspective on the overall budget, not based necessarily on the funds, but more on the nature of the revenue and expenditures. So I want to walk you through those and give you just a little bit different perspective. There are a lot of different ways to look at this information. This is something that we've used in the last few years that I think is helpful in really wrapping your head around what's happening within the budget and where these dollars are. So our original 2016 budget is $470.7 million, and you can see in these major categories what's increasing and what's decreasing. The total recommended budget is down about $4.2 million, and that's made up of utility funds that are overall down about almost $15 million, and that's due in large part to water and water rec capital programs that were quite large in 2016 budget, and so there aren't nearly as many large projects planned for next year, and so that reflects as a decrease in those funds. That's offset somewhat by the increase in the parking fund. The estimated capital investment for that project has been updated, and so that represents about a $5.8 million increase in the parking fund. The other enterprise funds are really, the changes are pretty modest, but when we roll all those together, it represents an overall decrease of about $14 $0.8 million. The next category of general operating is comprised mostly of the general fund. That's our primary operating fund, but there are other funds that the city maintains that have kind of ongoing operational kinds of expenses. But the general fund is flat to the current budget. The only significant change there is within the community development fund, which is part of what we categorize as general operating. We are investing about $500,000 more in the affordable housing program in 2017 than what we've got in the 2016 budget. So that's why it shows about a $500,000 net increase in general operating. The general capital, those are things, the capital investments that really are not associated with our utility funds or entertainment venues. So that's really a lot of our infrastructure. You can see it's up $3.2 million. Included in that is a $10 million increase in infrastructure for roads and drainage systems. So there's a significant bump this next year in investments in those types of infrastructure, and it's offset with some other decreases in other areas. We've a decrease in the amount we're going to spend on equipment, general equipment for next year. We had kind of a high year this year in purchasing transit buses, and so we won't be replacing buses to the same level next year that we did this year. The Spellerberg Park improvements will be wrapped up this year, and so those are coming out of the budget, as well as closing out a quality life bond fund that was budgeted for 2016. So when we roll all those things together, it ends up at about a $3.2 million overall increase in what we're budgeting in general capital investments. Entertainment venues are down by $1.2 million. That's really reflective of what's going on with the Washington Pavilion. We'll talk more about that next week. We've got a separate presentation on the entertainment tax. And then our internal services and trust funds are up. The most significant increase is in that self-insurance fund for employee health benefits. We went many years with no increases at all and managed costs to the point where premium increases were not needed. That's not the case this year. We are budgeting for an increase contribution to our group health plan, and as well as about a $2.1 million increase in expected benefit payments through that plan. In our property and liability insurance fund, which is included in that, you might recall we had some significant hailstorms here in 2014. The insurance process moves slowly, but it does eventually work. We've received a significant amount of dollars as reimbursements for some of the damages that we saw in city facilities. So a lot of those projects are going to get completed, be started this year, but for the most part it will be completed in the 2017 budget. So those insurance proceeds went into that insurance fund, and when the roofs are replaced and repairs are made, those costs will be paid for then out of those insurance proceeds. So those are some of the things going on within our internal service funds. When we roll all of this together, then we see all of our different bubbles, if you will, that comprise the city budget. Includes all 12 of our city departments, plus the mayor and city council budgets. All 22 of those funds that I mentioned that are rolled into the 2017 budget. And of course, dozens and dozens of different revenue sources, many of which that have restrictions on how those dollars can be used. The budget book that you have covers all of those. Again, the general operating that you see is primarily the general fund, but also includes a community development fund and transit fund that has some operational costs, our support for the transit operations. General capital, you can see the boxes along the side there represent the funding sources, primarily funded with that second penny sales tax. Also generate some storm drainage fees, as well as some grants that go into the general capital. The entertainment tax, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. Those dollars go to support our entertainment venues, and that comes from the third penny, or what we often call the bed, board, and booze tax. Utilities, talked a lot about those already. Those are our 5 enterprise funds, and then our internal service and trust funds, including our pension funds, as well as our 5 self-insurance, technology, and fleet revolving funds. So when we roll all those together, that's where we get our $466.6 million. Now I want to take just a little bit of time and dig into the general fund specifically. As I mentioned, this is an area where there's the greatest amount of latitude and discretion in terms of how dollars are spent, so we do spend a considerable amount of time on our general fund budget. It is the largest fund and is really the significant majority of what was identified as our general operating expenses. It's important to keep in mind that all of our general tax dollars go into the general fund, all of our property tax revenues, as well as our first penny sales tax revenues go into the general fund. Looking at a very high-level summary, you can see comparing with 2016's original budget, we're anticipating about $3.2 million more in revenue in 17 than what we have budgeted for 16. And on the expenditure side, you can see expenditures are flat and just down very, very slightly. Looking at that $158.9 million recommended expenditure budget for the general fund on a functional basis, you can see that public safety is the largest single piece of the pie when we're talking about the general fund. Represents about 39% of our general fund budget and is increasing or recommended to increase $1.1 million in 2017 over what's budgeted for 16. That's primarily in the police department. For the most part, personnel increases as well, including the 4 new police officers that I know you're aware of. Fire department budget is flat overall. That's largely possible because there are one-time initiatives that were included in the 2016 fire budget that are coming out, and those will offset increases in personnel costs in the fire department. Culture and rec, you can see, is down slightly. That's really made up primarily of 2 things. One, the Cayley Branch remodeling project that's in the 16 budget. Of course, that will roll out, and then rolling into the budget for the first full year will be the operational expenses for the Midco Aquatic Center. So those 2 things help offset one another, and overall, the culture and rec is down about $200,000. Highways and streets, you can see it looks as though it's down somewhat. That is largely related to the realignment of the GIS team from engineering to central services. Central services is included within the general government category. So you see dollars really just moving from one place to another within the budget, and that does not represent any real increase at all. And that's, as you can see, the general government is up about as much as the highways and streets is down, and that's really the primary reason, is that realignment of that GIS team. Public health is up primarily due to an increase in budget for professional services. Some of the services that they outsource at the clinic, for the most part, is driving that increase. Urban and economic development, the decrease there is really reflecting that workforce development grant pilot program that's included in the 16 budget, and we're recommending that that be discontinued and not funded in the 17 budget. That's really represents a shift of greater emphasis to the Sioux Falls Development Foundation to take really an exclusive lead in that workforce development. As you know, we're increasing the amount of their contract for the future, for the next 5 years with the Forward Sioux Falls contract. And I know they've redoubled their efforts in looking at workforce development and taking an even larger role in that as well. The significant decrease in transfers in the general fund budget, we have the last couple of years budgeted for a $1 million transfer from the general fund to the community development fund to support those large affordable housing projects. The community development fund has the dollars and the resources available without that transfer for 2017. So even though they'll maintain that program at the same $1 million, we won't need to supplement that with general fund dollars for 2017. So that reflects a decrease. And when we add all that up, it nets out to, as I say, just a very, very modest decrease in the overall general fund budget. Looking at that, the general fund change, digging a little bit deeper into that and looking at it from a little bit different perspective, we you can see that the overall wages and benefits, excluding the new aquatic center, are up about $3.1 million. And you know, one of the reasons we're able to maintain the service levels in 2017 while keeping the budget flat is really achieved due to those one-time initiatives that were in the 16 budget that are rolling out now and won't be funded next year, and so that frees up dollars and that can be redirected into some of these other areas like wage and benefit increases. In addition to the 4 additional patrol officers that are included in the budget, there is that health insurance increase that will amount to about a $1 million cost to the general fund. The Midco Aquatic Center, and that number includes all of the wages and benefits associated with that. We wanted to show you a full picture of how much that is increasing. That's a $1.1 million increase compared to the current 16 budget, which really is only intended to support it for the short period of time it will be open in 16. Repair and maintenance, again, that's where some of those one-time initiatives are rolling out of the budget, so that reflects a $1.5 million decrease. The Cayley Library project, some renovations at City Hall, some other library facility improvements, as well as some fire station improvements that are rolling out of the budget that are been completed in 16. Supplies and materials, you can see that's also showing a decrease. Again, there were some one-time initiatives in there. For example, the 2016 fire budget had a significant expenditure for some of their self-contained breathing apparatus. They had a grant that funded those, and those costs then will roll out in 2017, as well as some savings that we're anticipating within our overall fuel budget throughout the general fund budget. So those supplies and materials budgets overall are showing a decrease of about $700,000. I talked about the change in the transfers and what's behind that, as well as the workforce development decrease. Some of the other smaller things that are in there that we've categorized here as a $300,000 decrease in other. That reflects a reduction to the Prairie View prevention counseling contract that the city has of about $100,000. The street department within their snow removal budget, we've decreased that for some of the contractor costs as well as chemicals that puts their budget a little closer to what the actual expenses have been running. City council budget is in there. There won't the 16 budget included, of course, the regular city elections, so those costs can come out of the budget. In 17, and in the health department, there's I mentioned a modest increase in some of their outside services based on the demand for service that they're getting. So all of those things net out to a net decrease of $300,000 for the general fund decrease of just under $100,000. Looking at the general fund revenues then, we're anticipating revenues of $156.8 million. Of course, the primary sources are tax dollars. The property taxes will kick in about $57, almost $58 million. Again, that's $1.3 million more than what we have in the budget for 16. It's really being driven by the growth of our tax base. No CPI adjustment in the tax rate, so we'll get no additional dollars from that inflationary adjustment this year. Budgeting for a 4% growth in sales taxes for the remainder of 16. So we're anticipating finishing 16 with year-end growth of 4%, and then projecting 4% growth on top of that for 17. Government shared revenues represent about $12.7 million. You can see it drops off quite quickly after taxes are considered. The government shared revenues really include things like grants. Our health department receives a lot of federal grant funding. Motor vehicle fees are included in that, bank franchise taxes, liquor taxes, some of those things that either the county or the state collect and ultimately share some of that revenue with city government. Charges and permits, overall permit Revenues are down. That's really has to do with a timing issue with some of their renewals for contractor permits. The charges for services are up fairly significantly, about 1.6 million. That reflects the aquatics fees that we're anticipating, not only from the rate increase that the council approved, but also from opening the new aquatics facility. And in the other category, it's about $10 million or so from things like frontage tax, some fines and forfeitures, everything from late fines, you return a book late at the library, all those things get rolled into an other category. So you can see we're looking at about a $3.2 million increase in general fund revenues. General fund reserves then, I know that's always something you folks are interested in. Our budgeted use of general fund reserves, we're recommending $2.1 million. That's down 3.3 from the current 16 budget. And again, the actual projection, and I'll get a little more into that in just a minute, but the actual projection is that we would not actually use reserves, but in order to demonstrate a balanced budget, we are showing $2.1 million of budgeted use of reserves. It's really, it's relatively simple if you look at it on this level, that the general fund really needs money for two things. One, it needs money to support the expenditures and providing services throughout the year, and then we need money because we don't want to have our bank account be zero at the end of the year. We do want some amount of money in reserve at the end of the year. So those are our two funding requirements. Somehow we've got to come up with money to support those expenditures and have money left at the end of the year. And we really get money from two places. One, money we already have, money that's in reserve, and then new revenues that are coming in next year. And so that's how those reserves are used in terms of balancing the budget. When we can't, we know legally we cannot overexpend our general fund budget, so we know we're not going to run over there. We do anticipate revenues fairly conservatively. We don't like to be overly conservative. At the same time, we don't like to be overly optimistic. So essentially what that ends up, the end result is then that we do budget to utilize reserves, even though in the 17 budget, based on all of our projections, we'll actually add very modestly to the general fund reserves in 2017. So we're not anticipating or not projecting using reserves in 17, even though the budget reflects a small amount of reserves to balance the budget. Talk just a little more about that, how we budget to use reserves, and maybe drive that point home just a little more. This is a historical look at showing the amount of reserves that we've budgeted to use when the budget was adopted, and then comparing that with the amount that we actually used at the end of the year. Some of you have seen this information fairly recently, but you can see in the budgeted use column, we consistently, each year the budget is adopted, do include a budgeted use of reserves, and then by the end of the year, when actual data is in and all the bills have been paid and all the revenues are recorded, you can see that we almost always, in the past years anyway, have added dollars to those reserves. So even though we're budgeted to use reserves, that does not necessarily mean we will. And you can see in 2015 we budgeted to use $5.3 million, in reality used only $2.5 million, and that's really driven by a strategic use of reserves that were over and above that 25% level. So we use those for one-time things like the Cayley branch remodel, some of the remodeling we've done at City Hall, as well as help buffer opening a new fire station. You've heard me talk about that on a number of occasions. So it's a very strategic resource to be managed as we build up reserves and utilize them for those type of purposes, and then bring them back down. So you can certainly see the pattern there. In the 16 budget, that was approved last fall, it reflected $5.4 million of budgeted use of reserves, and in reality, today anyway, we're projecting to actually use about $3 million, right around the $3 million number. I think that really does demonstrate a pretty solid track record of conservative budgeting, keeping expenditures within our means, and again, strategically utilizing those one-time dollars, our reserves, for one-time expenditures. Looking ahead then, this is a kind of the historical look, a forward-looking graph looking at our projected general fund reserves. On the left-hand side is 2015. That's where we actually ended the year 2015. And then looking ahead, what we're projecting based on what we know today of where our future reserves will end each of those years. It's represented on a percentage basis, but you can see the dollar amounts along the bottom of each bar. This is, as I said before, perhaps one of the most important slides in all the budget presentations that we'll give you. This forecasting tool that we use for our general fund reserves really is kind of an underpinning or linchpin of keeping the city general fund on solid financial ground. It really keeps us out of trouble. It's a key element in how we determine from a financial perspective what we can take on in terms of new programs or expanded programs, additional staffing or additional facilities that have an operational impact. So this is really a key tool for our budget process. And again, it demonstrates how focused we are on evaluating the long-term impacts of today's decisions. And you can see some of the significant decision points that have either occurred or we're expecting to occur with regard to facilities. The Fire Station 11 that was opened in 2015, the Midco Aquatic Center with the first full year of operations in 17, and future fire stations. So all of those things are rolled into that. All of the operational impacts associated with those projects is rolled into this forecast. And you can see the 25% target level represented with that horizontal line. You can see the projection shows reserves will stay right at that 25% level until about 2022, when we're anticipating that on a percentage basis those reserves will continue to grow. If you look at the dollar amounts along the bottom of the slide, you see all along the dollar amount of reserves is growing, even though the percentage is relatively consistent there at that 25% level. Again, this is a projection. We're trying to predict the future here and what's going to happen based on certain assumptions. So it's always good, I think, to maybe revisit how have we done in the past in terms of projections and actual results. So I want to show you the kind of the track record that we have with our reserves. The blue bars represent a replication of a forecast that was shown to the council 5 years ago in August of 2011 when we were presenting the 2012 budget. The blue bars were presented just as they were on the previous slide as to what was projected or for general fund reserves. So you can see in 2012 we were projecting about a 28.6% reserve. In reality, the green bar, which is what the actual result is, we ended at 36.5%. So we were certainly on the conservative side at that point. And you can see each of the green bars represent actual results, and in each case, we ended up at a higher reserve level than what had been projected. But if you look at 2016, I think it's particularly interesting that in 2012, we were projecting that we would finish 2016 at 25.5% reserve level, and in fact, that's what we're projecting today, that we will end at 25.5%. So from that standpoint, we've been incredibly consistent. I think surprisingly that it's just right on the button as the same exact picture that you saw 5 years ago. And really, it's not that everything happened exactly the way we thought it would happen. Certainly things, some costs came in higher, some came in lower, revenues come in higher, revenues come in lower. But at the end of the day, I think this demonstrates the city's ability to manage and adapt when things do change. again, to manage to that 25% reserve level so that we maintain that strong financial position. You can see the orange then is today's forecast going forward for the next several years. Again, we're projecting to stay right at very near that 25% level, just slightly above it. And so this gives you a picture of what our track record really looks like. Now I want to go back and talk a little more about moving away now from the general fund, but talking about some of the rest of the portions of the budget. The general capital portion, again, you can see the funding sources for those general capital expenditures across the top of the chart. Primarily that second penny sales tax revenue, but there are some other sources that fund what we call general capital. The roads, road improvements, road investments, highways and streets, whatever you want to call it, that really represents the single biggest piece of the general capital pie. 56.9 million, 51.4 of that is represented by new projects. Some of that $56 million is used on debt service for previous flood control and storm drainage improvements. So those costs associated with the individual projects are all rolled in there together. Parks, 5.1 million. Again, all this is detailed out within the capital book that you have, as well as the budget book. The equipment, we reinvest a lot in equipment. It's important to provide the services that we do, whether we're talking about the street department and how heavily dependent they are on the equipment, parks department as well, all very dependent on equipment. So we're trying hard to adequately fund the timely replacement of equipment as well. And then lastly, the $13.2 million for city facilities, and that's includes the debt service payments on things like the event center, some of the quality of life bonds for example, the library portion of that is reflected there, but it also includes additional investments that we'll be making in park facilities as well. The utilities are 5 utility funds. Again, user fees, primary funding source, and you can see spread out across the bottom there's that gives you the relative size of those individual budgets. I won't recite to you how much each one is up or down. You can see that in the book itself. You can see water reclamation is by far the largest enterprise fund that we have. Parking fund is a significant budget this year. It's up about $5.8 million. Again, that's related to the increase in the estimated investment for the parking ramp relative to what's in the current budget. So I wanted to point that out specifically. The water department budget is actually down slightly, about $4.3 million versus the current budget. The electric and sanitary landfill, I think, are fairly flat. Entertainment venues, again, the funding source for this is our third penny entertainment tax. That revenue supports the operating, repair and maintenance, and capital needs of the city's entertainment venues. You can see them all listed on the slide there. Overall, the entertainment tax budget that's recommended for 17 is down $1.2 million. And the total budget is 6.9. Again, the most significant change there has to do with the Washington Pavilion. We've completed some larger R&M projects as well as capital projects this year. And again, you'll have a more detailed presentation on that next week. So looking at the overall budget again, we plugged in the dollar amounts here on this slide that you saw before. You can see what comprises that $466.6 million overall budget and where those dollars will be invested. At that point, I'll pause. I've got one more slide, but I'll stop and see what questions you folks have.
Are there questions? Councilor Staley.
Yes, I have 4 questions. They're short ones.
Okay, let's do them one at a time.
Okay, question number 1. I was wondering on page 4, have you gotten the sales tax growth rate for July yet?
No, not yet.
So when would that be coming in?
I would hope to have that by the end of this week. Sometime this week, we should get the second July number.
So then we'll be getting a new chart.
Right, we update that chart every month.
Okay. Second question. Page. Oh, when we're talking about the reserve, is that do you include the enterprise funds in that?
The reserves that were covered in the presentation today are just general fund reserves.
So where will we hear about the enterprise funds?
Well, Mark Cotter will be here and talk about all of the public works budgets. The bulk of the discussion about the enterprise funds and the reserves really took place earlier this year when the council considered rate increases. So that's when really the benchmark was set, was when the rate models were adopted earlier this year. But Mark will provide a recap of the budget process there.
But like as far as finding out the amount that's, when we're looking at finances here, is there some place where it's written down what exactly is in all the enterprise funds for the
You
like
get
the
that
water
report, it's in your monthly report every month, yep.
Then another question on page 12, you were talking about when we're talking about general fund revenues, and you said under other, the 10.2 million, you were talking about library fines and things. So you're saying, could you give me just some more clarification on what would be in there? I mean, did I hear you right when you said library fines?
There are a lot of things that make up that other category of general fund revenues. Some of the larger ones are the frontage tax. The city assesses a frontage tax for
Okay.
street maintenance. That's $1 a foot. The lodging and bid tax is dropped into that category. Those are the dollars that the city collects and passes through to the CVB. Any kinds of fines or forfeitures, not a significant source of revenue, but they're included in the other category. Late book fines, I don't even have a number on that. I mean, it's really not consequential to the overall budget. I just wanted to give you kind of an illustration of the types of things that went in there.
Okay, and then my last question had to do with, on page 7, and you were talking on the non-appropriated funds, and you were down at the bottom of that chart, you said that, because you said all of those non-appropriated funds come from the user fees, correct?
They're generally supported, the enterprise funds are generally pretty exclusively supported with user fees. They do generate other types of revenues, of course, just ancillary to that business.
The question I had was like when we're talking about workers' compensation, employee retirement fund, that means that the workers are paying into that, the city does not pay into that for them?
Workers' comp in South Dakota is an expense of the employer, so the city pays into that fund. That's a cost that the other funds that have employees bear. So the general fund makes a contribution to the workers' comp fund on behalf to support the costs associated with workers' comp for general fund employees.
So, okay, so
And then
that
the
would be,
benefits of
that's a first penny expense then?
Well, that's one, first penny goes into the general fund, yes, along with other revenues, but
Thank you.
then benefits, if somebody is injured, are paid out of that fund then.
And let me also say, I appreciate your presentation. I really do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions? Counselor Neisert.
Can you just review for us a couple of acronyms, OSEP and OASI?
Sure. OASI is Old Age and Survivor Insurance, essentially Social Security. OSEP is Other Capital Equipment Program, Other Capital Expenditures. Not sure what the E stands for. It's the second part of our capital program. We've got capital improvements, and then we've got equipment, essentially. OSEP represents the equipment piece.
Okay.
Good. Do you have one more?
Yeah. Wages and benefit increases. Do we know if that's going to be across the board for everybody, or if that's, maybe that'll come in with Bill O'Toole?
Yeah, and I know Bill won't be able to go into a lot of specifics as those union contracts are currently being negotiated, so we don't typically talk in much detail on those, but.
Okay, very good.
Other questions?
Yes.
Counselor.
Great. Director Turbeck, one of the things I was looking at on page 3, the property tax growth, our friends in Lincoln County and the citizens of Sioux Falls that are in Lincoln County, how do you forecast the pretty major reevaluation process that they're going through? You talked about increases from new construction, but were we able to identify, I know our friends on the Lincoln County Commission say that residents should be patient because there's going, as part of the reevaluation process and bringing them up to 100%, that their taxes may go down because the amount of valuation in that area is going to go up significantly. Did we take any of that into consideration, and how do you get to that forecast number? Maybe more of a general way to explain it.
The short answer is no, we don't take that into account, because at the end of the day, it doesn't generate any change in the amount of revenue that the city receives. If a homeowner's taxes go down because of a reappraisal, somebody else's taxes are going to go up. So the city will continue to collect the same amount of money from the existing property as we have in the past. What the reappraisal will do will shift that burden from one property taxpayer to another. So if one property class has been undervalued in the past and that gets raised up, a greater share of the property tax overall will come from that class that's been increased. But what that will do then means the amount of property tax revenues from other classes will go down. So we get no benefit or no harm from reappraisals.
Perfect. Thank you.
One more, another one?
Yeah, one more.
Councilor Nizer?
So looking at the line for the unobligated cash balance applied, so that's where we're taking, or we're at least leaving it open to take money out of the general fund each year? Is that what you were, when you were discussing that?
The 2.1 million. Mm-hmm.
And so the number varies. So I guess just to make sure I understand it, so what you're saying is we appropriate a chunk of money so that if you need to, because you're never going to project exactly what you're going to make in a given year, that you have a little bit of play to work with. Is that essentially it? So you don't have to come back to us and ask us for if you're off by a couple dollars?
Well,
does that make sense?
I'm not sure I follow exactly what your question is. In the general fund, we, by state law, cannot overspend the budget. So we'll never see a department overspend their budget. If they do, they've violated the state budget law, and I'll probably go to jail. So I don't want to see that happen.
Okay.
So we know going into a budget year that we're not going to spend, very likely that we're not going to spend 100% of what's been appropriated for expenditures. So in effect, we know there's going to be some money left unspent in the budget by the end of the year. Typically, that runs somewhere around 2%. And so if you look at the overall budget of the general fund, what we're projecting to have left unspent, this for the 2017 budget is very close to the amount we're budgeting to use as reserve. So it's really a means of demonstrating a balanced budget. We don't really, if we end the year with 2% left in our budget and every revenue comes in to the dollar what we projected, then we would not use any reserves at all. Does that make sense?
Well, so how do you decide what number to put in here? Why is it 2 million one year and 5 million another year? You know, where's that number coming from?
It's based off that general fund reserve forecast. So we look at a forecast for the next several years, but certainly the focus is always on the very next year. But it's we forecast how much revenues are going to go up, how much our overall personnel costs are going to go up, how much our overall operating expenses are going to go up, how much money is going to be left in the budget at the end of the year, take all those things into account, and manage to that 25% level. So we want to make sure that based on that forecast, we don't fall below that 25%. So if we ever do, it would be as a result of something that was unanticipated, whether it's a natural disaster. Maybe we proactively maybe there's something you want to tackle as a city that's important enough to say, you know what, we're going to set aside that floor for 1 year. We're going to use some of that reserve money to do something that's really important, knowing that we want to grow that back up to that 25% level in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
if I can just maybe finish my answer to that, in 2016, we knew we wanted to tackle some things, and we had reserves that were over and above that 25% level. We said, well, what can we accomplish with that? If there are things that we want to accomplish, we don't have ongoing revenues that are going to support that necessarily. So we tackle things like the Cayley Library remodeling project, $1 million. It's a one-time expense. Our reserve, using some of our reserve, is a one-time use of those dollars. So it's a perfectly appropriate way to use some of those excess reserves. One thing we would never do is look at, if we have reserves above 25%, say, well, we can hire 20 new cops. We've got extra money. Well, once we spend that money once, it's not automatically replenished. So you have to be very selective about how you utilize reserves.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else has questions, proceed.
Okay.
If you would,
I say I got one more slide and I close my book, so I make sure I get back to my notes here. You've heard me reference the general government part of the general fund budget a number of times in the earlier slides, so I wanted to provide you a little more breakdown. The departments and offices that you see listed on this slide are what comprise general government, and you see these listed in your monthly report each month. So the mayor, the council, all of the kind of general city services that really support all of the other departments are listed there. So you can see how much, what the total budget is for each one of those general government departments or offices. And so there's not really a whole lot going on there. We don't typically spend a lot of time talking about these. You do see some increases and decreases there. And for the most part, that's really has to do with the realignment of some of the positions we've talked about. For example, if you look at technology, it's showing an increase of $600,000. Well, again, that's largely due to the fact that the GIS team is now going to be budgeted and accounted for within technology. And if you look in your book at the engineering department, you'll see an offsetting decrease within engineering because that GIS team is no longer budgeted there. Same thing in finance. You see a $500,000 increase. Well, that's a result of realignment of positions from other departments moving into finance, namely the project management office is the most significant. So you see money moving from one area to another, but overall the net change is about $600,000. And if you really wanted to pin that down to one thing, it would be primarily due to that GIS moving in from engineering, which is categorized as a public works department. Today, it will now be fall under the general government portion. So I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you have on that before I turn it over to Bill O'Toole. Again, there's very little otherwise changing in any of these.
I too want to thank you for a good job, giving us a good overview of what city finances are like and where we want to go in the future. And as you know, we'll be drilling down more on this. So thank you very much for getting us started.
Happy to be here. Hope you're having fun.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
Director O'Toole, how are you today?
Good afternoon, Council. Bill O'Toole, Human Resources. Appreciate the opportunity to come and talk a little bit about the personnel costs associated with the budget this year. As in years past, I always like to give an overview and talk a little bit about the functional allocation of our personnel across the spectrum of government. Benchmark our employees against a 10,000 population. Look at some of our high-level employment statistics and get into some of those 2017 personnel services actual costs. And look at that in relation to the general fund, and also talk specifically about the 6 new positions. The first chart that I'd like to show is how we are currently structured as of 2016 in terms of our personnel allocated to the various sectors of government. And you can see from this chart, I think a very distinct priority jumps out in terms of public safety across the city of Sioux Falls. 41% of city employees are involved in either the police department or the fire department. And you can see the various breakdowns from that. But just to give you some reference points as well, the 41% in public safety would be about 499 employees. 289 of those are police officers and 210 are firefighters. So just a quick, good visual illustration of where our employees are sectioned across government. Another chart that I like to show here is the red bars are the Sioux Falls population, the blue bars are city employees, and the green line is the number of city employees per 10,000 population. And across the charts here, we're looking at a 26-year period from 1990 to 2016. And if you were to do the math in terms of the population increase, that's since 1990, it's a 71% increase in population. Or just over 72,000 people, and by reference point, I think Rapid City has a population of about 73,000. So during this time period in question, we've grown the size of Rapid City, which I think is a pretty telling story all by itself. And during this process as well, we have grown 46% in employees, or added 390 over this 26-year period. But I think what this is also showing you is that here at the City of Sioux Falls, we have about, and have had about 71 employees per 10,000 population for a while. Now, how does that compare? If we look at some of our peer cities, and again, I always like to give this caveat that we don't do any specific analysis with respect to the level of services that are provided in these cities. This is just data that we grab and take a look at and see how we stack up. And obviously you can see that if you're just looking at the raw data, we stack up very well in terms of the number of city employees per 10,000 population for some of our peers. Some of those employment statistics that we like to look at, again, just at a high level, we like to look at it from the standpoint of kind of what's coming in the door and kind of going out, if you will, and sharing some of those numbers. And what you're seeing here is some data in terms of the number of applications that we receive on an annual basis, our vacancies, and then what that translates to in terms of the average number of applications for those vacancies that we have. We think we're doing quite well. Obviously, as Tracy was showing you earlier, that we have a pretty low unemployment environment at 2.3%. We think we've lagged a little bit here in terms of some of our numbers, but we do feel that the employment team in our office is still very confident in terms of the quality of people that we're able to still select with the vacancies that we have. The other thing I wanted to mention, again, I think a lot of employers are feeling this as well. When you think about some of those employment statistics, I thought I'd just share a few of the numbers in terms of, we have probably over 230 different types of jobs in the City of Sioux Falls. When you think of all the services that we provide and the functions that we provide, we're doing very well in terms of applications when it comes to positions that have less requirements in terms of education and qualifications. And those numbers are high, but when you get into those kind of high demand trade areas or highly technical positions, our numbers are probably what you would expect. For example, this past year, we were hiring for a plumbing inspector and only received 6 applications. If you look at a dental assistant, for example, 5 applications. So depending on the vacancy and the need that you have, you're really going to see a swing. But it's always nice to share some of that average information as well. So I thought I'd just share some of those numbers. Well, and again, on the flip side, for example, we had a vacancy in our office for a human resources technician not that long ago, and we had over 130 applications for that job. So there's quite a range, and I thought I'd just share a few of those with you today. From the turnover side of things, obviously turnover is going to include retirements as well. And as I think this council knows, we had made a pretty big change back in July of 2013 where new employees went to SDRS. So we had employees holding back in 2013, and we had quite a few retirements in 2014, and it's starting to taper off a little bit, and it did in 2015 as well. But otherwise, I think you can see that we've otherwise enjoyed a pretty low turnover here at the City of Sioux Falls. And just to share some specifics, for example, in 2014, we had 120 separations, and 85 of those were retirements. And in 2015, we had 99 separations, and 46 of those were retirements. And kind of our normal expectation is right around 35 to 40 retirements per year. So just to kind of put that in perspective. But otherwise, we enjoy low turnover at the City of Sioux Falls. If we first look now at the 2017 personnel services and our costs, in terms of the total all-in budget at $466 million, our personnel costs are 28% of the total budget. Another way to look at it is obviously the general fund. You heard Tracy talk specifically that's where most of our operation costs are from, and about 84% of our city employees are paid out of the general fund. And if you look at the general fund at $158.9 million, $106.6 million is the personnel costs, or about 67% of the general fund is going to fund personnel costs for the City of Sioux Falls. And I always like to say at this point too that obviously that's a significant number, but it's the people, it's our staff that are ones that are out there delivering the programs and services of local government. The other thing we like to do is to say, okay, of that percentage, how does that stack up and compare to prior years? And obviously what this slide is showing you is that it pretty much stays fairly consistent as we would expect it over the years, no exception for 2017 as well. And if we further break down those personnel costs, that 67% chart, if you will, as you would expect, the largest breakdown of the personnel costs are the wages and salaries of the employees at 72%, followed by the pension costs, 11% for the health, dental, and life insurance. And Tracy just schooled us a little bit ago on the OISI and the workers' compensation. And I just whispered to Angie next to me, and I was glad he had to answer the acronym for OISI. I don't know that I would have been able to come up with it right on the spot. So nice job, Tracy. That was pretty good. Again, as this council already knows, the recommendation for the 2017 budget is to add 4 police officers. And I'll first talk about those because those will be the general fund supported positions. There is an opportunity, I think, for the police department to apply for a COPS grant application to potentially fund a couple of those, but this budget includes dollars to the tune of about $284,000 to support those officers, whether or not the COPS grant is successful or not. The other 2 positions are enterprise funded positions to the tune of about $139,153. And the first position is in the Public Works Department. It's a sewer collection supervisor. And what I'd like to clarify for the council is that that position, we have one of those positions right now within the Public Works Department. It's responsible for supervising 20 full-time and 8 part-time positions. There's a significant span of control issue with that. And the other opportunity that the Public Works Department wants to do is they want to separate out their teams in terms of the sanitary sewer and the storm drainage systems. There's been tremendous growth in those respective infrastructures, and it's a great opportunity, and this was identified as a significant priority. So that's why we decided to fund that position, and appreciate your support for that. And the last one is in central services, a building maintenance worker. I think you're all fairly familiar with activities and the consolidation efforts that we've made in that regard, but that position would be an enterprise funded position and dedicated to the Public Works Department. Again, if these 66 FTEs are approved in this budget, we always like to keep track of where we sit with respect to the full-time city employees. The 2017 FTE count would then be 1,234 full-time employees. And if we then updated our chart to reflect those additions, obviously with the growth, the ongoing growth in population as well, it does not change our 71 employees per 10,000 population with the addition of that staff. These next couple of slides are some follow-up, and these were slides taken directly from the mayor's presentation as well. Just wanted to reiterate a couple other, or not a couple other, but these organizational changes, and you heard Tracy talk about them as well. Again, I think this council and this body is aware of the centralized approach that we're taking with respect to the fleet. So we will be moving a park mechanic and some fire emergency vehicle technicians underneath the umbrella of fleet. Also going to realign GIS. There are 6 employees associated with the GIS division that will be moving from Public Works to Central Services. Obviously, GIS is an enterprise-wide system, much like IT, and we thought that made a great deal of sense to combine those services. And lastly, realigning project management to finance. We started with 1 project manager a few years ago, and we now have 4 project managers throughout the city of Sioux Falls, and we thought this was the appropriate time to align those positions with a specific department, and we thought it was a perfect alignment with the finance department to align the business process with some financial processes. So that's how we landed with that move there. And lastly, and the mayor specifically said I would elaborate on one particular provision here. These are the bullet points that he identified with respect to some challenges that we're looking at as we move forward in terms of finding part-time employees. I won't get into the first 2, but I did want to provide a comment with respect to balancing the restrictions associated with the Affordable Care Act. You know, nobody's trying to make a political statement or say anything negative with respect to the Affordable Care Act, but the reality is they did have some issues for employers, public sector, private, that did have an impact on how you go about identifying and dealing with part-time employees. In essence, it does require us that if part-time employees work beyond a prescribed number of hours each week, you have to provide them health care benefits. We've defined that here at the City of Sioux Falls as 28 hours per week. So if you're 28 hours or less, we don't have to pay health insurance benefits. If you work more than 28, then you're required to provide health insurance benefits. So it's a significant issue. It's a significant cost item and consideration for any employer as you're looking at your needs. And obviously that first bullet point is significant to us in that, you know, we're looking at hiring anywhere from 650 employees each year. Now, if we just said, all right, well, let's just all cover health care insurance and not worry about the number of hours. Well, that would have a cost of about $2.76 million. So that's obviously a very significant issue. So the end result is employers are looking at this, and whereas they used to have 1 part-time employee, they're now having to get 2 part-time employees to cover the same work if they don't want to provide health insurance. So it's just a significant issue, and that's some of the challenges that we face. And we've been helping the departments with those issues. But it has been an issue for us, and I thought I'd provide just a little bit of background as it related to that issue for you. And really with that, I thought I would take any questions at this particular time. And really to follow up to something that Tracy was talking about, I think there's a question over here from Councilor Neitzer. The other thing I think that alleviates potential excess dollars at the end of the year is, of course, those attrition numbers that I was talking about earlier, those turnover rates. A lot of times if you have a gap between when somebody leaves, when you hire the next person, you're generating personnel savings through that process, and oftentimes you may be replacing them from a higher rate to a lower rate that generates some of those savings as well. So I just thought I'd follow up from that as well. Otherwise, that would conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. In regards to the full-time employees on page 24, I'm curious how many, I know you mentioned that we have part-time employees, temporary employment of 650 throughout the year. Talk to me a little bit about part-time employees, though. What does that look like from last year? Are we bringing on any more part-time employees? I know we're talking full-time employees, that there's only 6, but compare part-time employees over last year to this year, and if we're bringing on anybody for a few part-time hours here or there. And then also talk to me a little bit about how many employees will be included in the pool, if they're all part-time, or it's obviously not in the full-time.
Yeah, I guess what I have, at least from the general fund side of things, there is an increase of $500,000 for part-time dollars from last year to this year.
How many people is that about? Or is that just we have to spend that amount?
It could be, right.
Whatever it is.
It would depend what you're getting out of them in terms of their commitment. How many hours are they working? Now, again, I would tell you as well, we have the ability to hire interim employees, which would then be benefit eligible employees for the health care insurance. but we don't exercise that a great deal because of the cost associated with doing that. But otherwise, the part-time dollars is you're gonna manage your part-time dollars as best you can. So if you think if you need 25 to do a certain task, I mean, you're gonna just figure out how to manage that. And departments do a pretty good job with that.
So is it safe to say that $500,000 increase for part-time employees is probably mostly for the pool, or where would that be going?
That's
mostly?
across the entire spectrum.
It's not
It's
allocated
not
for
just specific
department?
to that. And I don't know, we may have to follow up with that counselor in terms of what is the specific dollar associated with parks. unless
Yeah,
anyone has that
and not
number.
necessarily even parks, but it's going to take someone to clean it, it's going to take, and I don't know if that's in that full-time as well, or if that's under parks. And if you want me to save that question and have Don address it, Director Kearney address it when he's
Yeah,
here,
and I do
I'm fine
know-
with that too.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Counselor. I do know that it's a combination thereof.
Okay, yeah, I'd like more information on that if,
That's at least a partial answer, which is
562,000 for part-time. Okay, and Director Turbeck is just showing me that the part-time dollars associated with the Midco is 562,337.
so that's just for the Midco.
That's just for the Midco.
So what does that leave for the rest of city?
And again, I don't have that right off the top of my head.
Sorry, I
We
you
can
know.
we'll definitely follow up and get an answer.
I
for
would
you,
appreciate
Counselor.
that. Thank you so much. I don't mean to surprise you with questions. Sometimes as we hear stuff, things pop up and it's like, oh, hey, what about that? We hear about full-time, how about part-time? Because I know last year, a lot of the focus was on getting rid of part-time employees and consolidating them to have one person, not have the turnover. I know we heard Director Quambeck-Etten talk about, if I have to keep training these people to do technology services every time and they're coming and going, if we can consolidate that into a full-time employee, it's that turnaround and that learning curve is much different. And so that's why I was just comparing that to what part-time looks like now.
And you're absolutely right in terms of that analysis, and that is something that we push and challenge the departments to take a look at on a regular basis, and I think they do a pretty good job with that, where you do look at those pool of dollars to say, does it make more sense to pool that and convert that to a full-time employee? And you have seen some of that across probably the past few years and more of that occurring, and we're always looking at that, because it sometimes does make sense to do that.
Right.
It also sometimes makes sense to go down the part-time route when you're looking at, your business hours. In fact, for Parks and Recreation, for example, you look at those hours that you're open. Obviously, you can't have one full-time employee cover 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. or 9. You've got to make a combination of that, and you try to find that right balance, but you're absolutely right.
Right. And I'd be curious too how we sorry if I may, Mr. Chair, how we compare to other communities, because we compare 71 looks pretty great, and we don't have that. We're only adding 6 this year, and it's a modest increase. But how we compare to other communities, and utilizing part-time employees as well within our region, because our region is very similar to the Omaha, Sioux City, Rapid City. I'm just kind of curious. That doesn't need to be by next week by any means, but just hypothetically thinking how we compare with that part-time
We'll
as well.
definitely make a note for that.
Thank you.
Counselor Selberg.
Thank you. Thanks, Director O'Toole, for the presentation today. On page 21, in regards to the turnover rate, maybe you've touched on this, I'm sure it's probably out there, but is there a stat available on the turnover rate in the business community of Sioux Falls as a whole? I'm just kind of curious how it might compare.
I'm sure there is one. I don't have it with me right now. What I would tell you is that of the research that I have done, and in fact, I just looked at a Gallup article today where I was reading about that, what is a healthy turnover rate for organizations? And again, I guess it depends, is the percentage that are leaving you your top performers, or are they your low performers? And in that regard, you might want your percentage to be a little bit different, but on average, at least what I read from the research from Gallup is they were kind of pegging at 10% as a general barometer.
Okay. Thank you.
Counselor Staley.
Counselor Erickson was talking about community conversations and part-time, full-time, and I had a conversation recently with someone about overtime, and they said that the city is cutting back on some overtime positions, or saying that policy saying no more overtime right now because of budget constraints. Could you address that?
I can, from the standpoint, yes, I can. There is no such policy or provision that says there is no overtime. Each department manages their overtime as best they can in order to conduct their business at hand. Obviously, there's always going to be a certain amount of overtime that's going to go with your operations. I mean, for example, in the police department, there are some things that happen you just can't control. If there's a serious crime that's been committed, people aren't going to be saying, well, it's 4 o'clock on Friday, I got to go home. That's going to turn into overtime. And of course, overtime is governed by federal law. If an employee works beyond 40 hours in a work week, they're entitled by law to overtime. So we can't say you're not going to get it from that perspective. But there is no policy that says no additional overtime or no overtime at the city.
See, I have one comment to make, and that is that on page 24, your employees per 10,000 of population. When I came here 6 years ago, I looked at that and said, that's, we're in the lower end of that, and that's great. I see now that it's still the same 6 years later. And when we try to control government, if you will, the amount of employees is an important way to monitor that. And for us to be able to do what we do and continue to do what we do, to keeping it at 71 is very, very good. So thank you very much.
Appreciate that, Councilor. Thank you.
Okay, next, Central Services Director Etten.
Good afternoon. Sue Quanbeck-Etten, Director of Central Services. First, let me start by just giving you a brief overview of what comprises the department Central Services. It includes centralized facilities, which are a couple of different teams. One is for custodial care, the other for preventive maintenance, and also capital improvement projects that have to do with maintenance for our city facilities. This is something that has become centralized over the last 6 years. When I first started as Director of Central Services in 2010, Central Services was responsible for essentially four buildings: City Hall, Annex, Main Library, and Carnegie Town Hall. And since then, we've just grown that because it just makes sense to have the facilities piece of it centralized within my department, so you don't have law enforcement, for example, sergeant that was responsible for overseeing custodial staff at the law enforcement center. So it includes maintenance and custodial. In terms of technology, we have our help desk, our frontline support. We support all of the different software applications that are, in some cases, specialized to each department. In other cases, are more global in nature. We have our data center team, which is top-notch. We have added the GIS division, as you've heard already. Due to its technology-centric composition in terms of GIS, it's very technology-driven, and it just makes sense. They do provide GIS supply services to all areas of city government, just as all my other areas do. And then, like I said, software support for all the departments. One of the things that has evolved over 6 years also in terms of the technology side of things is, again, more of that centralization, where before you might have pockets within other departments where they were trying to take care of their technology needs on their own, which really wasn't efficient. And then in the end, you have to integrate everything into our network and our data centers. So it just makes sense to have that all centralized. So as we're going through the budget process this year, and as we have the last several years, it's just been getting stronger and stronger, that relationship between the IT analysts and the financial analysts, and then the managers within each of the departments as we all develop our budgets. And then we have multimedia support, which includes our CityLink, our 24-hour cable TV channel, our city website, the official website for the City of Sioux Falls, We have document publishing specialists, and we offer mail services for the entire city. Just to talk a moment in terms of the facilities management, we do offer a single point management for 35 facilities. And what that does is one of the things is offers that consistent standard for all of our city buildings, which we feel is very important. We are focusing more and more on cyclic repair and maintenance programs, which are, again, very important. Someone has to keep that top of mind in terms of, even the simplest things like carpet replacement, painting, tuck pointing buildings, taking care of the roof and the HVAC system and all of that. And we have to budget for that. We do want to ensure that all of the budgets are adequate for daily maintenance. And then we have consolidated over the years maintenance and service contracts. We maintain and take care of over 14 contracts, such things as HVAC, general upkeep, painting, electrical contract, carpet cleaning, elevator maintenance, plumbing, snow removal, fire sprinkler alarm testing, pit drain cleaning, pest control, mowing, window cleaning, the list goes on and on. All those things, again, have been centralized within central services so that, number one, we can get a volume discount where we can, and then we have that standard of care as well. What we really want to do is allow the departments to focus on the services that they provide, whether that be librarians or public safety, public works. We want them to focus on what they do, and we want the facilities team to focus on maintaining our city buildings. We currently maintain around 650,000 square feet of office space. We do over 4,000 maintenance tickets a year, and that number just keeps going up and up. We have a 60% increase in the number of work tickets for facilities in the last 5 years, and we expect for 2016 to end with well over 5,000 tickets. The 2017 budget, as you've heard, will add one additional building maintenance worker. And with that, we will bring an additional 6 facilities and another 200,000 square feet under central services. Multimedia support, as I said, we offer our 24-hour cable TV channel on Midco and Vast broadband channels. We offer educational programs such as City Scene, Ask the Mayor, Inside Town Hall. We also create educational PSAs that are run on dozens of Midco and Vast broadband channels to educate the public. And of course, we broadcast and web stream all of the city council meetings. We have our official website for the City of Sioux Falls. We know that it is well utilized. In 2015, we had 4.4 million page views. So we know people go to the website to get information. We also have Facebook and Twitter accounts for the city. And the number of followers continues to grow and grow there for people that like to get their news from social media. And then we do offer internal publishing services. We have graphic designers. We have proofreaders that are available for all departments to utilize. We also have a fully functioning copy center for print needs. However, almost everything we do is published on the web, and we're doing our best to cut down on the amount of paper documents that used to be printed in mass quantities, such as annual reports. Again, technology, we offer our help desk to support all the city users. We protect and maintain the city's network and data centers. We provide geographical information and mapping information through the GIS division. And as a city, we're always reviewing how we can be more efficient and effective. We all know that the use of technology can be a valuable tool to support the frontline services, protect and maintain the city assets, and to aid in the planning of future projects. Just to talk about a few of those technology projects, just the larger ones in terms of the last year or so. Munis Financials was a huge one for us. Went from a AS400 mainframe environment to a web-based. This has eliminated redundant data entry in many different areas. It provides real-time data, which is very important for all of us in every department. And then we also got a paperless payroll system out of it. So that was wonderful. It's been very efficient for us. And EnerGov land management system was another huge one. Allows mobile capabilities and a central system of record for land management data. For the parks, RecTrack, which allows for more online functions such as shelter reservations and pool passes. And we put in the aquatic centers, wireless APs to allow, especially for that pool pass. It was something that we had to plan for well in advance. And we just rolled out our mobile website, our mobile-friendly website. We know that over 50% of all the users that come to siouxfalls.org are using a smartphone or tablet. And this project included a redesign of our existing site, implemented a new architecture, and front-end content for a mobile-friendly solution. Some of the bigger projects that are currently in progress include the I did want to mention one other one that we just completed, a work ticket system. We just did an upgrade on that, and that allows for more automated workflows. And then the self-service portal. So all of our users can keep track of tickets in the system, and we do have a lot of tickets at any time in the system. In 2015, we worked over 3,900 facility maintenance tickets. We worked over 13,000 multimedia support tickets, and almost 19,000 IT work tickets, for a total of almost 36,000 tickets completed last year. Projects in the works: public safety, computer-aided dispatch, and records management for fire rescue. Did the full RFP process for that. Just completed software vendor demonstrations these last couple of weeks and scoring. And contract negotiations are underway. On the fleet management software project, we did an RFP there as well. Vendor was chosen, and software implementation to be completed by first quarter of next year. On some of the bigger future technology projects include asset management, and that is definitely a multi-year project. Needs assessment and requirements gathering are underway right now for an asset management solution. We plan to do an RFP and implementation to be completed in either 2018 or possibly even 2019. And then document routing, we want to eliminate what is left of paper processes. And that includes some of the bigger ticket items are contracts and agreements and performance evals. And finally, utility billing, we're going to be doing an upgrade there for more self-service functions. And that concludes my presentation for today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Councilor Neisert.
Thank you. Will your building maintenance worker, are they going to be responsible for all of essentially public works buildings? Is that what we're getting at, or?
We will be certainly taking care of all the office space within all of the buildings that would include public works buildings, and we are also planning for, at the very least, oversight and advisement in terms of those outer line buildings such as landfill, for example. They do want our help, and they do want us to participate with any maintenance projects that they might have. It does make it a little more difficult in terms of just the drive time that's involved. You know, to some of these facilities, we do it with our mail services every day. It's a 70-mile route, you know, each day, because there's so many stops along the way and there are so many buildings. But yes, our intention is to have oversight for every building that the city owns, other than the managed building. The managed buildings would include like convention center and event center, those types of things. And again, Jeremy Williams, who's my maintenance supervisor, certainly is always available to for counsel and assistance with any of our buildings. But in terms of the hands-on, it would be those 35 buildings.
And last question.
Yeah.
Who does that today, if anybody, and where would this employee be based out of?
It will be based out of central services. I have employees that are all over the city. We've got employees that report to the law enforcement center, for example. We have employees that report to Water Rec, Water Pure, and then we have many that report to the downtown, our core area. But what we're trying to do is to develop a more quadrant approach in terms of how we service our buildings. And we do that to some extent now, but we need to do more of that. The more mobile we can become, the more efficient we will be in terms of service maintenance that needs to be done. We want to, you know, catch the west area in one fell swoop if we can, if there's something that's needed at a fire station in that vicinity, and also Kaylee or Ronnie or any of those. We try to catch them, you know, on the same day. And we want to do more and more of that with our quadrant approach.
Councilor Selbert.
Thank you. Thanks for being here today. Quick question. I know we track and monitor things such as website hits, what we get on the sites, that type thing. With like television and CityLink, do we get things such as TV ratings back or readings back, how many people we're reaching with certain programming and what we get for our investment there? I mean, I'm sure Tuesday at 7's must-see TV, but do you get kind of the breakdown on those type things?
I wish we did. We've been asking for it for 6 years. Midco at one point was telling me that might be a possibility. Now when they are putting in these new devices for the all-digital channels, I'm hoping that we can get better reporting from them. It has been something that we've wanted, but it hasn't been something that we've been given in the past. So generally, we just base it on the number of comments that we might get from the public. We do occasionally get some in terms of, I like that certain program and that kind of thing.
Okay, great, thanks.
Welcome.
Councilor Erickson.
I may have heard you wrong, so I want to just clarify. I thought I heard you mention that you're bringing on 6 new buildings. Mm-hmm. What 6 new buildings are not already under you? I guess I was under the understanding that all buildings were under you.
They are in terms of custodial care. We have been a little bit ahead of the curve there in terms of, but now this is the maintenance side as well.
Oh, gotcha.
So the Parks admin office, for example, and the Parks shop over at 49th and Western, that vicinity, the water maintenance shop, light and power, landfill, and then Water Rec we had been overseeing in terms of custodial, but now we'll be looking at maintenance there as well, and then the CityLink portion of the Orpheum.
Okay, that answers my question. I was thinking it was the custodial side. If I may ask one more question.
Sure.
In regards to SIRE, where are we with the updates on that? We've talked about some new technology and all the fun issues we've had over the years.
I know that OnBase acquired SIRE, so we're hopeful that their R&D will ramp up. I know that there have been a couple of meetings with the operations committee with Tom Greco to talk more about whether we decide to stay with OnBase to see what they do with their R&D. I've got to think that they know that they have to be able to support platforms other than just the Windows platform in order to stay competitive. They have said that that is their plan. So I guess we could get more information from Tom Greco, but my understanding is that we're taking a little bit of a wait and see to see what happens later this year. Certainly an RFP is a possibility as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm on operations, and I was in those conversations. My concern was that there's nothing in the CIP for any updates potentially for 17. And so I just wanted to know kind of, I guess, a broader plan of what was going to happen, because we've received complaints and had some issues along the way. And if they take on the new platforms of being able to have an iPad or different phones, get it, that makes sense. And I don't know how they can stay competitive without offering that kind of technology.
Exactly.
So thank you for the update.
Any other questions? I have a couple. On your budget for facilities management, expenditures standby, I see there's a 135% increase. What, is that standby employees? Or,
Yeah, we have somebody on standby 24 hours a day. So in case there is an emergency at any of our buildings, we need to have somebody at the ready to address the issue.
and then, part-time is there, on information technology, I see workman's comp went up almost 500%. Can you help me with that?
I don't know, Bill, if you can answer. I don't have anything to do with those numbers, and we get those from HR.
Oh,
Thank you, Bill. So I need more to cover for GIS. So I have more employees coming into central services, and whatever that dollar figure is to cover the number
how
of
many
FTE.
employees with GIS?
6.
How many do you have now?
I've got 61 full-time employees, and this will make, 68, and then
My point is, why does it go up 449.1% for 6 employees? These are really high-paid employees.
Would we not see the reduction elsewhere?
Yeah, but the percentage, the proportion isn't right, Counselor. So if you could look into that and get back to me, that would be
Okay.
great. I pointed that, or I found that the other day when I was looking through this.
I'll talk to HR about that, and we will get you more information on that.
A misstatement or something, or might be a mistake in the printing.
We'll find out.
Oh, okay.
We'll get you more
No
information
problem.
on that.
Do you want to know a page, Bill? Page number is 15. Wait a minute. Yeah, that's correct, 15.
Yeah, I think what you're looking at is the increase, the difference of, you have 71,000. Is that correct?
No, went from last year $1,655 to $9,088. Down about halfway through workman's
Yep.
compensation.
Yes, no, I just found out, we'll follow up with you, Counselor, with the specifics on that.
We just, it sent up a red flag. Unless she's hiring the people to climb the tower someplace, workman's comp shouldn't be that high on IT or that kind of thing. Don't, gentlemen, ladies, you'll get it.
All right, so Tom Huber is saying you'll find that offset in the engineering budget for their workers' comp, going down that amount.
Okay, but my
And
point
transferred
is
to
still for
central
6
services.
employees, for it to go up by $8,000. She has 64 employees, and she had a $1,900 bill. Now she's got 6 more employees, and it goes up to $9,000? We got some research. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it now. I'm just,
Okay.
yeah. I understand the offset, but something's a little wacky. Yeah, we'll look at it, and you'll get back to me. Okay, any other questions for?
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
You're
Okay. Community Development, Les Kinstead.
Good afternoon. As was just stated by the chair, my name is Les Kinstead. I'm the Affordable Housing Manager for the City of Sioux Falls. In the Department of Community Development, my boss respectfully declined to say anything during Ketchum, so I'm carrying the ball, I guess, for right now. So yeah. We, oh, he's doing slides for me. Good, that's great. Okay, Affordable Housing Division. What I wanted to do, first of all, is give you the view probably from 50,000 feet so you can get kind of an overall view, and then we're certainly not going to delve into 5,000 feet in every area, but maybe get a little more specific here in just a bit. In our department, we have a total of 6 major program areas that we work within, and I'll try in just a few words to tell you a little bit about what those areas are about. Neighborhood revitalization centers around, we work with our partner Affordable Housing Solutions, and we acquire properties throughout the community that are dilapidated or blighted properties. Typically, they're properties that have had a lot of problems with code compliance, issues like that. Those are purchased. We typically get those for less than $20,000. That's a general rule of thumb, sometimes somewhat under that too. And we demolish those properties, clearing the land, and then we have land available for basically 2 programs, one of which is the construction of single-family houses on those bare lots throughout the community. And that's one aspect of it. Those are made available, as are all of our programs, to low and moderate income people in the community. And then the second is what we call small multifamily housing. We did a 4-plex up on 3rd and Spring, just down by the Good Samaritan Nursing Home in that general area. We also have done some over on the east side of town, but around town we'll typically do smaller multifamily projects, 4 or 5-plex units, duplexes, things like that. So that's the kind of the one area that we have as a primary area. Rehabilitation is another area for low and moderate income people in the community. We will work with them. They apply if they qualify because their income is low. We will work with them and provide loans for rehab of a house. You typically will get people who may or not have the dollars to keep their property up like we'd like to see it, to be good neighbors, as we've oftentimes said. And without the financial wherewithal, the properties tend to go downhill. It makes for a negative impact in the neighborhood, and so we try to do something with that in terms of it can be a roof, it can be siding on the building, it can be windows, high efficiency furnaces, a wide range of things that those of you, and I would presume most of us, if not all of us, are homeowners. You know what it's like to have to keep a house up. So we do that with low and moderate income families. We also have a mobile home repair program. When I first came here, I said to myself, my goodness, we're doing that, but you'll find after you gain a little experience that in many cases a mobile home it keeps the family from being homeless, whether it's a good choice economically, in a lot of other ways, it's ready, fast, available housing, and it does play a role in providing housing for people. So we too do a repair program there. We also have a repair program for rental properties, the exterior of rental properties in the neighborhood. The whole idea being trying to preserve and enhance and grow the quality of that neighborhood and not have neighborhoods start going down like what you've seen in a few areas of our town and certainly in other communities. Homebuyer assistance, we have a program for assisting first-time homebuyers who are low and moderate income people to get into homes. We've had that program for a number of years. That's still in existence, and we're providing help to people in that. The next category, rental assistance, kind of is a broader-based area. We focus in on families that are homeless or near homeless families, and we provide them who don't have a place to go. Our partner, Interlakes Community Action Agency, works with those families and provides housing for a 1, 2, 3 month period of time, and then some rental assistance after that until those families can get employed, get back on their feet, and start becoming well housed and that part of their life stabilized. In addition to that, we also, you'll find that sometimes the folks that are homeless may not have had the benefit of the perhaps training and how they were raised in some of the basic skills of life. So part of a requirement in that program is that they take a series of courses on such basic topics as finance, budgeting, tenant-landlord relations, employment, how to complete a resume, how to get a job, how to hold a job. And so there's a curriculum that those people will take. It's a prerequisite to receiving assistance under the program, and they also have to be gainfully employed. So there's some fairly strict rules, but we've been pleased with the outcome. We're generally in the 60 to 70% of the people who go through the program graduate and move on to being, at least for the time period that we can track them, as good, solid, productive part of the community. In addition to that, we have a couple of smaller programs that we call community outreach is the large budgetary category that we go with. Those are like the home builders and the repair affair. We also do some things with independent living solutions and provide access in rental units for people who are handicapped. The last area that I'll cover, and then we'll go into some more of the specifics, is large multifamily housing projects. So we do that. That's somewhat of a self-explanatory. If you note the picture there, that's a picture of one of the first projects that we did about 3 years ago. And so that's up and functioning. It's 56 units, and they are all full. So the only other comment that I would want to add to that is finance categorizes our budget as a complex budget, and working with it, there's a lot of different sources of funding. We have 4 major sources of funding that we have. They include money from the Housing and Urban Development Department, federal money, obviously the general fund contribution that you see in front of you today. So there's another source. We are unique in the sense that we have a lot of loans out in the community. We don't give grants when we fix up these homes. They're loans, and they can be on very favorable terms depending upon the economic status of the person involved, but we do get loans paid off every day. And so it'll run anywhere from $300,000 to about $600,000 a year that comes back in as people move, change homes, pay off the mortgage that we take on the property for the improvements that we help them do. So I'll get into some more specifics on that a little bit later. And then accumulated cash reserves. I was listening to Tracy when I was downstairs waiting to come up, and we did and will be utilizing some of our reserves this year to fund specifically that $1 million category for multifamily housing. So on the next slide, when you look at the so-called IPOs, or not IPOs, I guess I'm getting my acronyms confused, but they're the indicators that you have in your OBIs, that's it, operational budget indicators. When you take a look at that, they largely break down into about 3 areas. One of the objectives is increasing the supply of affordable housing. In other words, building and making more housing stock out there that's affordable than what we have right now. That happens in 2 basic programs, which I just talked to you about, the multifamily housing with apartment buildings, things of that nature, and then the individual neighborhood revitalization, where you get single-family homes and smaller multifamily units. The other objective that we have is to stabilize the supply of safe and affordable housing, and that we focus in that area on the repairs and the neighborhood revitalization, the repairs of the different buildings that we do for moderate and low and moderate income people. I mentioned earlier the redevelopment of blighted properties. I don't have any of the slides with me today, but sometime it would be interesting to show you. I think we took a couple of the council members out and showed them a property that we had purchased, and it's amazing what you can see. Councilor Kiley and Erickson, that was at the beginning of your terms, and we'd be glad to do that with any of you if you'd have an interest. So, but there's some pretty scary stuff out there. So, and then the last objective is providing education and assistance for families. That goes to what we call the Bright Futures program, the one I just described to you, that is carried out through Interlakes Community Action Program, one of our partners in getting this done. Next slide, please. And you can see in this slide it says there's a high demand for affordable housing. You probably heard statistics before, but I thought I would just quote to you some of the things that indicate in the community the demand for affordable housing. It's a situation of high demand and low supply. What's interesting and sometimes sobering to note is that when you take a look at the Section 8 waiting list at the Sioux Falls Housing Office, Right now, there are just slightly over 3,200 people on that waiting list. And so it's a lot of people looking for assistance in their housing matters. And many of those people are extremely low income people, below 30% of average median income, which is considered extremely low in the categories that we use and that are used across the country as a whole. Currently, you can use a lot of different numbers, but by and large, we're at about, roughly speaking, a 4% vacancy rate. Depends upon whose statistics you're going to listen to, but it's suffice to say it's a tight market. Like I said a few minutes ago, there's an awful lot of demand, and the supply is not there to cover all of the demand. The other statistic I think that's worth noting is that the average wait for rental assistance on that list I mentioned with 3,200 people is 4 to 5 years. So you can put your name on the list, and by the time you get to the top of the list, it may be 3, 4, or 5 years later. So, and that's not at all uncommon. When you look across the United States as a whole, many metropolitan areas have waiting lists that are in excess of that. So, but it's a problem. The last thing that I would say about the numbers and the statistics is that when you take a look at people, there are categories of extremely burdened by their rent cost, burdened by their rent cost, and someone who's in a safe margin. The usual margin that people use is that we as a people or as a family shouldn't, or a person shouldn't be paying more than 30% of our income for housing and utilities. If you're in that range, most banks will consider you to be in a safe range. When you start getting above that, between the 30 to 50% of your income, you're rent burdened. In other words, the rent is too much in comparison to your compensation. And the other part of that, the upper, when you start getting above 50%, you're getting into an area where that family is within this far of being homeless, because you can't over a long haul be spending 50, 55, 60% of your income on housing and expect to keep that up. And usually what happens is it's the rent that suffers. Pretty soon they're back and they haven't paid the rent, and then we're back to the old homeless thing again. So those are a few of the facts that we thought were willing to, or were good to share with you. The other thing on this slide, it talks about investing our dollars to get the highest return. This will show up in just a few minutes as well. But we, in the last 3 years or so, have been placing more emphasis on multifamily housing. You'll find that for the amount of time and effort involved, it just makes sense that with a building like what you see here, Chasing Willows, that's going to provide 56 units of rental housing, and it's a more bang for the buck type of situation. So we've been trying to do more of those multifamily type of properties. Next slide, please. The characteristics of what we've been doing with the large multi-unit housing projects are, first of all, that they're a public-private partnership. The decision was made a long time ago in this community, back in the 70s and 80s, that we weren't going to have public housing like what you've seen in a lot of the communities throughout the country, and that we've relied a lot more heavily on the private sector and the public working in partnership to do this. This program would be a good example of that. We've invested $1 million per year for the last several years. It was a little bit less than that in the beginning, and in a few minutes I'll show you a slide that indicates what the results are. Generally speaking, these are construction of new units. We're just starting right now and getting into a little less expensive way of doing it, which is rehab and remodeling of existing apartment buildings. These are loans, I should emphasize. They're not grants. Nothing that we do in this area is not paid back. There are repayments back to us where we have that program income that we mentioned earlier. One of the things that's important to notice is when you start counting projects, most of these projects are pretty complex, and for the time from when you conceptualize that we should put an apartment complex at 57th and Sycamore, or whatever the location is around town, it can be 2 and 3 years before, sometimes even 4, before that project becomes a reality. So an awful lot of things that got to fall into place, not only with us, but with the private sector, the South Dakota Housing Authority, and other funding sources. So they do take a while. And like I said, we budgeted, or you budgeted, $1 million last year. We'd like to do that this year. We've managed to pull together the dollars to do that without dipping into the general fund. And just to show you, in 2016, we had $1 million worth of funds and about $2.5 million worth of applications. So there certainly is demand out there. Next slide, please. This is a listing of the projects that we've done in the last 3 years since you folks helped us and funded those that category in the budget. We started with $500,000, we went to $1 million, and then another $1 million on top of that. This next year will be another $1 million that we're requesting. I won't read off the names of these or tell you where they are. You can see the numbers of units, and the other thing that I would emphasize, that isn't just one team doing this. You know, my boss, Darren Smith, from before Darren Ketchum now, and the folks that work with me, that's not something that we do by ourselves. This really is a partnership. And we've invested $3.5 million. It's generated 232 units in a 3-year period. But the thing that's sobering and really gets your attention is when you take the total cost of those projects, it's about $30 million. So we're doing a small part of it. We're helping to stimulate some of what's going on, but there are a lot of other people playing in this ball game as well, and not the least of which are some of the developers right here in Sioux Falls. So, generally speaking, we're right at about $1.8 million federal dollars and $1.7 million general funds that we put into this program, and that, I guess, would cover the slides. Other than there are 2 more slides. If you want to give me the last or the next to last slide. This is a picture of our budget between 2016 and 2017. All of the categories, with one exception, are pretty much the same as what they were in the previous year. You can see as you go down the right-hand column, it's 0 change. The only change is the one that we highlighted in green, which is neighborhood revitalization. And the difference there is in 2016, we constructed and sold 6 houses, and I should say we. When I say we, I mean Affordable Housing Solutions. Again, you don't do it by yourself. And then in 2010, we're shooting to build and sell 10 of those homes. So that additional $500,000 is the cost for those additional 4 houses. And you'll see on the next page that money comes back in again, because these houses are funded out of a revolving fund that we have, and we'll pull money out to build a house. The house sells, the money goes back in, so it's a revolving fund. But again, the last slide, please. There you can see the $1.9 million in revolving funds. That's where that extra $500,000 is coming from. It's not general fund tax dollars that are being expended. It's dollars that are renewed every time we sell a home. So those are, the prepared comments. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those questions. If not, I certainly can take my chair too.
Are there any questions for Les? Councilor Urtenbach.
Thank you, Les. I appreciate the report, and I appreciate your work in this area. It's, it's a big deal in this community. But the city has a huge role in, this is a quality of life issue. It really is about those folks having places to live. And you use the word scary, and that's a nice word for some of the folks in some of the places that you're talking about.
Some pretty bad stuff out there. So.
Yeah. Just a couple of questions then. I'm looking at, again, the outcome-based indicators that you were pointing to. I wanted to just talk real quickly about the city's role in Heartland House. It's pretty far down that first page, page 94 in the book that we're in, talking about the amount of money that we give to Heartland House. And can you talk then about how much do we give to Heartland House as a city, and then what's our role? How do we, how do we control that money? How does that work for us?
Well, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I, be honest with you, I can't pull them all off the top of my head.
That's okay.
Al, do you have that? Or we can get it? I want to say it's about $35,000 to Heartland House. I think we're in that general area. $24,000, I was high. That provides ongoing assistance to them for security deposits, items that they need to operate that. I think what you really have to do is take a look at Heartland House and the Bright Futures program together and the tenant-based rentals. When you get all that, we're right at almost up to $500,000 for that program. I know Bright Futures alone, with everything that you consider with tenant-based rental assistance, is $405,000. So that's kind of a hangover from, or a carryover, I guess would be a better word, from Mayor Munson's administration when Heartland House first got started. And that's got the longer tenure of being around, but the Bright Futures program was conceptualized about 6 years ago and really does the bulk of the heavy lifting.
Right, exactly. If I might, Mr. Chair,
Please.
Bright Futures has a huge impact on these families that we're talking about, and we've increased our contribution to Bright Futures. And is it all based out of Heartland House then, so that we're just helping fund that?
Heartland House
case?
and Bright Futures, what the distinction is between them primarily is source of federal funding. The Heartland House funding, the vast majority of that comes directly out of the federal government, directly to ICAP. Bright Futures is our locally funded program with the money that we get from the feds and with the money that we have available, both home and community development block grants.
And then if I might, just one more, based on that, the conversation about federal dollars, then talk about the idea that, and I'm looking on the bottom of page 95 on the budget book that's available online and in various places, but talk about that idea that you're budgeting for level federal dollars between 2016 and 2017.
Yep.
2016 is kind of a crazy political year, so what happens to us as a community if that level funding doesn't happen? What if that's cut? And we're looking at our total contribution locally as we're cutting that somewhat. What's our plan B? Do we have something in our back pocket that, we're doing great things here. I'm just hear me be nervous about this.
No. Well, a good example of what happened with regard to that is in the last budget funding cycle that we just received or just got notice of, there was a bill introduced, and as you know, there are lots of competing philosophies and different degrees of what some people would call common sense, some call conservatism against being proactive. I mean, there's lots of things happening in the national legislature. There was a bill that released that would have cut the home program itself by 95%, down to 5% of what it was. For a while, the thing looked like it was getting traction and would be a problem nationwide. All the organizations and the folks that are involved in housing got together. Sioux Falls Housing, I know, was involved in the efforts to stop that. So if that happens, the home funding is a major part of what this Bright Futures program is about. And if that were to go out the window, then we would be faced with a decision: do we, continue this program and the good it does? If so, how do we do it? Where does the money come from?
Exactly, and I guess then the overarching conversation is about that homeless count, that point in time that we do in January in South Dakota, and every year the rules are changed on how that count is able to be done, and so those numbers continue to go down and down and down, and then our federal funding for the state is based on those artificial numbers that are going down. So we put all of this into the mix, and this idea of the politics of the national government at this point. I mean, we could be hung out to dry at some point, and we just need to be aware as a council that we have to be prepared. There has to be a plan B when it comes to this sort of programming. I just want to congratulate you guys. You do a great job. These numbers are really healthy, and I appreciate it. I wish they were double what they are, but we're doing what we can as a community using the dollars that we have available, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Hearing none, I have a couple less.
Okay.
Number one, on your fourth or fifth or third slide, whatever, where you talked about default rate on the revolving fund situation. Can you tell me, or you didn't talk about it, but the question in my mind was, is there a default rate on that?
Yeah. I haven't looked at it since the last time, but I have no reason to believe that it would vary. Some time ago, we came to this council prior to the new folks joining the council, and there was a write-off of numbers, or write-off of loans that had been paid. And I'm remembering that was right about in a 4 to 6% range,
Okay.
Councilor Rolfing.
Good. Perfect.
And I think the other thing that you got to remember is you're not dealing with AAA rated folks. You're dealing with people that have had economic problems in life. And but that's my recollection of the default rate.
Thank you. I still have more.
Okay, good.
I thank you for keeping in the core facade money and increasing it down the line. That's great. Along the lines of what you said, doing some planning for possible scenarios of not getting some of this money, et cetera, et cetera. I see that you put some money in to do a complete study of affordable housing.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. That'll be ahead of the curve, and that'll be great to have that done. I had one other one with affordable housing. If I can find it here. I cannot find it, so I guess, oh, I know what it was. Here it is here. Okay, somebody's going to have to look at this a little bit with me again. I see on your OSEP that we've under urban management. Would that be you?
Mr. Chair, we're just doing affordable housing right now. You have two more.
I understand that.
Yep.
But urban development, he's talking affordable housing. Yeah, I'm just saying
Okay.
you're asking the wrong guy.
Point is, I probably wouldn't be equipped to give you a good answer to
Not a
that
problem.
particular
I'll
one.
get it from someplace else. Not a
It's one
problem.
of the guys sitting over there, this gentleman. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you all. Oh, excuse me.
Get Rex.
Oh,
Can I
I'm
ask
sorry,
one- yeah.
Counselor.
One
Sullivan.
quick question. Thank you, Les. On slide on page 32, you talked about the 3.5 million we've invested in 232 units for the last 3 years. Is that correct? How much of that 30 million was invested, came from state and federal funds towards it?
You know,
Any idea?
that's a hard question to answer. I'd have to take each project apart, but as a general rule of thumb, when you do a low-income housing tax credit project, the general rule of thumb that you use off the top is about 70% of it comes through that mechanism. And that's capital that comes in that is not a debt that needs to be paid back. Private companies invest in projects like this because they have large, huge income tax burdens, and instead of paying that, they pay it into this program, and it reduces their federal tax obligation. So the best answer I could give you probably would be around 70%. There is oftentimes other dollars, they call it layering, where you stack other dollars on top of that, but 70 would be a good start.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we have Brent O'Neill for community development, economic development.
Good afternoon, Council. Brent O'Neill with the Economic Development Division, here to talk about the things that we do in our budget request for 2017. I'm going to start off really quickly, a slide that'll look somewhat familiar, at least the verbiage. The pictures are new. But what our office does, really in a nutshell, comes down to those things up there: promoting and facilitating a vibrant economy. We want to find strong growth occurring continuously in our community. We want to support a rising tax base of the community. We want Sioux Falls to be a place of innovation and growth where those sectors are possible. And of course, the citizenry, we want great jobs for those folks in our community. We're a very hands-on approach, if you will. We're working with businesses and prospects on a daily basis. That involves some sort of technical assistance from time to time, as well as things like incentives and different programs that we have that can support those businesses. Among the things we do, the bulk of them can probably be categorized into these three areas: supporting business development and business expansion opportunities. And that really combines the prospects, those companies that we're chasing primarily from out of town, as well as those businesses in town that we're trying to help be successful, to grow, to expand. And an often used statistic is of all the economic development activities you do, anywhere between 70 and 90% of an economic growth of a community is really your existing businesses, existing investors growing their companies and reinvesting in the community. And that, is true in Sioux Falls. And a lot of the successes we see are really those companies continuing to grow on an annual basis. Downtown growth is an important focus area of our department and the city. That involves things like the facade easement program, and that picture in the middle I wanted up there specifically. It renovated what's now called the Foundry building, where Traditions had been and vacated. It's actually two storefronts, but that was an opportunity to revitalize an old building, put a new tenant in there, and actually attract a well-known, at least regional retailer tenant to downtown, and that's been a big success there. And that third category is supporting neighborhood engagement and revitalization, and this is a program that we're really trying to get the community involved in their neighborhoods, as well as supporting neighborhood-type projects, and it does overlap to some degree the work Les works on, but a couple areas that we're targeting in particular for redevelopment might be that Pettigrew Heights neighborhood and that 11th Street corridor. I will take just a moment, and I've got a lot longer list, but I did want to rattle off a few of our successes from 2015, like the High Roller expansion was about a $15 million investment on the northwest part of our town. It's an existing company that relocated, and as part of that reinvestment also added jobs to the community. We supported the downtown Washington Square project, and the council approved a TIF district for that in 2015. Bell's expansion, Badlands Pond is actually one that our office worked quite a bit with. There were no incentives involved there, but there were a lot of interactions with government on that, with access and getting that project done. I mentioned Duluth Trading Company already. All in total, we've identified 47 projects through our tracking means, projects that we were a part of in some way, shape, or form in 2015. I can't move on, and it's very important to talk about the partnerships that support economic development in the community as a whole, and the city and the economic development department are one of many stools, and those, among several partners, we've got 7 up there, the Sioux Falls Development Foundation, who we partner with daily and we're a financial partner on. CCOG we're a part of. We work hand in hand with the Governor's Office of Economic Development. We work hand in hand with Downtown Sioux Falls, including an annual funding agreement with them. The CVB promotes our city. Forward Sioux Falls, taking kind of a rising tide approach with a private partnership with the business community, as well as other public and nonprofit sectors, and then the Chamber of Commerce. With that, we'll move into the budget overview as a whole, our 2017 request. We are requesting $8.2 million on the operating side, a little over $100,000, actually $150,000 to be specific, on our facade program in the core areas, preserving our historic buildings and stimulating additional development, leading our total investment request for 2017 at $8.3 million. Focusing just on that operating piece, that $8.2 million, it's broken down there, and those first 3 categories, what says pass-through, are really revenues that whether it's pre-arranged agreements or other factors, are really revenues that come in with a path to leave the city to those intended sources. So the occupancy tax and the hotel room night charge will generate about $3.5 million in 2017. That goes to the CVB. That number in the budget book is flat over last year, and the reason for it being flat isn't that we aren't projecting an increase, it's actually that 2016 numbers projected out will be slightly less than the 2016 number, so when we do budget in for growth, it gets us back to our original 2016 number, so that's where those numbers are going to be flat. TIF, I have a separate slide coming up in a second, but again, those previous commitments that this council and past councils have made to supporting projects through tax increment financing, those budgeting mechanisms come through our office, and then we distribute those out to those projects that receive them. The hotel occupancy Hilton item is actually a very small item, but it was a special tax placed on that particular property when we were tearing down the river ramp and trying to get that site prepared for a future development. So that is what that one is for. The remainder of our budget, it's really about 20% of our budget, goes to, again, supporting those partners I mentioned before, Forward Sioux Falls, the Sioux Falls Development Foundation, as well as Downtown Sioux Falls. Our payroll piece of that's about $500,000. And then we've got about $200,000 that goes to our professional services, some things we do to support the neighborhood efforts through neighborhood grants, some of our travel training, et cetera. So of that budget, it's important to note to you guys the changes or the significant changes over our 2016 budget, and it's It's pretty straightforward. Wages and some of those extraneous things are going to go down slightly. Forward Sioux Falls, we're recommending that increase their annual contribution over the last 5 years had been $300,000. So this would take that to $400,000 per year. Two of our growth areas in the budget are actually those pass-through line items, tax increment financing outflows, as well as that Hilton Hotel project. There were two initiatives, one initiative in 2016's budget, which was a $500,000 in workforce development that was going to go to support the grant program, as well as the USD Discovery District. And we looked at that in 2015 as a one-time infusion into the workforce development needs of the community, and then again in 2016, again viewed it as a one-time infusion into those workforce needs. We are recommending that with Forward Sioux Falls taking on that leadership role and entering their new campaign with substantially additional resources, that they're going to be best positioned, and will actually be adding staff capacity to look at workforce development issues in our community at a higher level. And so we are recommending that stays in their wheelhouse. The other small increase in our budget is $15,000 towards neighborhood organizations. Currently, we have a $10,000 grant program that allows up to $2,000 in grants to support various efforts in neighborhood organizations. By taking that to $25,000 in total, that will allow us to spread that net a little bit wider. And not only that, but in a couple cases, maybe do some larger projects than we've been able to do in the past. There's a previous picture helping purchase paint to do some street murals in neighborhoods, some lighting projects, signage, all those things would be eligible in that area. I referred to a slide on tax increment financing, and this is more or less a refresher slide, just telling you again what projects are out there that receive tax increment financing. I will point out that in the last year plus, we've approved the TIF for 3rd Avenue Lofts, a project that Affordable Housing Division is also participating in, as well as the Washington Square projects. So those are two new projects that will be added to the list going forward. I'm going to close talking about our priorities going forward, and one that I think is very important is just self-assessment and reassessment from time to time. And that first bullet point there talks about our division going through a strategic planning process to, again, re-identify where our development priorities are, where we want to focus our resources, which projects we want to pursue, which priorities are going to be important to our partners as well, and how do we pursue them and best pursue them on a relatively small budget. So that is something we're going to start this fall, and hopefully either by the end of this year or early next year have that, and that I think will be a really good driving force for us to take what we've done to the next level. Among the other priorities, again, we'll continue to focus our efforts on downtown. One specific project we've been working on, the Business Improvement District, is 1/2 of the funding that the Downtown Sioux Falls organization receives to implement various things downtown, and that is a more or less a self-tax on the properties downtown. Again, in the spirit of reassessment and always trying to do things best, we want to relook at that program and see if there's any changes that we want to bring forward later this year or in 2017. The Sports and Entertainment District has been a high priority of ours. That's the area really, if you take Russell in Minnesota, that intersection, and then look northwest by going down Minnesota and Russell, includes the event center area, the airport, Badlands Pond, the new Elmwood Hotel project that we're working on, Sanford Sports Complex, et cetera, putting a lot of effort into promoting that area for some growth, not only for our community, but in that neighborhood as well, bringing amenities to that part of town. Probably one of the, and I'm still relatively young in my career, but I'm going to fast forward to the end of my career. I think working on the railroad project will be one of the benchmark projects of anyone's career. And so that's an opportunity in front of us, working on about 10 acres of development land that will take a lot of involvement, a lot of partnership, including internal collaboration and finding private development partners. So working with planning and public works in particular on setting the next stage for that is very important. We have some great opportunities with industrial parks in town. Park 7 and 8, owned by the Development Foundation, still have some capacity to find tenants. Foundation Park, as we all know, is a monumental park for the city and the state, and taking that to its next steps are going to be very important for us, as well as there are private partners in town that own land or are in the business of recruiting development projects. So there's opportunities for private development parks as well that we're going to be working on. Neighborhood redevelopment and specific projects that we can tackle in neighborhoods will be a high priority. And then another great project that I'm happy to be part of a team on is the mixed-use parking ramp project that we're working on downtown, trying to add a great new supply of parking spaces to town, but to do it right, to make it look well, to make it fit in with downtown, and to maximize the use of the site by bringing in private development with that. So those are our priorities, and I hope to have a very positive report back on those next year, and we're going to continue to work hard building the economy of Sioux Falls. So with that, I will pause for questions.
Any questions for Brett? Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two different sets of related questions. I'd like to ask the first set now, and then when the rest of the group is done, if my second set hasn't been asked, I'd like to have permission to ask those then after, if that would be okay.
How many questions in each set?
I have 3 in one set and 2 in the other set.
Okay.
I'm not. Thanks, Brett. I appreciate you making your report. The first question that I have has to do with the homeless site services and homeless advisory board line items that we moved last year. Somebody asked me this the other day, where does it come from? And I went, oh, it comes out of economic development. And now I'm looking at my book going, no, it doesn't. Remind me where it is, where it comes out.
It moved to Alessa's division, so it's in the affordable housing.
Affordable housing.
Yes.
It's not listed as clearly in affordable housing as it was on your side. Okay. So I want to talk specifically about neighborhood grants. I want to explain them in a little bit more detail. It's especially in the central district, those core neighborhoods are really using those grants to the best of their ability. And so some of those folks, those people in those neighborhoods have asked, number one, how does a neighborhood qualify for a grant? And how can they use it? Do they have to spend it all in 1 year, or can they start to kind of accumulate it a little bit so they can do some of those larger projects? Can you talk about that program just a little bit?
Sure, those are good questions, and maybe I'll answer your second one first a little bit. With such a small budget and $10,000, to help several neighborhoods doesn't go very far. So $2,000 has been the ceiling thus far, and because they're competitive and because they're in demand, we've generally asked folks to come up with projects that can implement them and expend the funds in 1 year. They are set up as a reimbursable grant, so we do ask the associations to complete the work. When it's verified that the work's been done, that we can provide the funding to reimburse them. We are looking, though, and certainly an increase will help with this, looking at can we help more neighborhood organizations with this. And on your first question, as of now, a qualifier for the program is being a registered organization with the city. We have about 25 of those organizations right now. It's really easy. It's more or less an extra hand from the city, and Adam Roach in particular, our office, runs that program. But it's really at the neighborhood's discretion on how much or how little they want to use that. So that would be a qualifier. But with the $2,000 program, it's been anything from like street signage. So you see, like All Saints neighborhood has hung signs up, just prettying up the neighborhood and telling folks where they are. That would be one. We did some streetscape improvements in the Pettigrew Heights neighborhood on kind of that triangle of Grange and where 10th and 11th and 12th all kind of converge from the one-ways into the two-ways. There's been some ways of adding lighting to poorly lit areas in neighborhoods, alleys in particular, and actually that piece as a whole has been very successful in reducing crime calls and people concerned about just activity in their neighborhoods. So those would be 3 examples. I will say that, things that can have a direct impact or direct visible impact are largely considered. We want to be fairly open and allow the neighborhoods to be creative and kind of defined how they want to use that money in their neighborhoods.
Right. Well, and you know, shout out to the All Saints neighborhood because they're using that money in amazing and different, really creative ways. So that's one of them that they've talked about. You know, even just our operating expenses would be helpful. You know, they do some mailings of postcards. They do, you know, gatherings. If we could have some help to buy ice cream for an ice cream social, those sorts of things. You know, they just were talking about just general operating funds. But then they also, I mean, they're really our poster child right now. You know, as we all know. But they're really looking at, you know, how do they improve Lyon Park? And they're going to buy that sculpture that's sitting there on the corner of Lyon Park. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yeah. You know, those kinds of things need to come out of that. And so I'm not saying that we're doing it wrong. I'm just saying I hope that we really start to see the value in this. And I'm really glad it's increased. I was going to ask that it be increased, but I would hope that we think in the future, how can we build this even more? That this is something where we're getting a great bang for our buck when we talk about investing in neighborhoods from the city standpoint. So thank you, Brett.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? I have one. Page 87 on the budget. For economic development, it says capital budget under expenditures, intangibles. Now, if that was, you know, $100, it wouldn't bother me, but somehow intangible at 150,000 doesn't quite add up to enough description. He's smiling at me like I know.
Yeah, if I could get help on this one, sure. And I'm sure on the intangibles. Oh, okay.
It's an easement, so it's not a tangible asset.
Okay, I understand now. Yeah, no, that 150,000 is our our requested budget number for the facade easement program. The intangible piece, you threw me there for a second, is really because it doesn't become a tangible asset. So it's just if it's maybe fair to say, it's just a word choice to describe how that program.
I figured that's what it was, but maybe next year could be, you know, whatever. You got it. Your guys have got it in the back, so that we know a little bit more about what's going on there. I knew it was a good spending of money, but where I didn't know. Any other questions? Yes, you have your second set.
I do have my second set, if that's all right. I appreciate it, Mr. Chair. I wanted to look at your outcome-based indicators in our budget book. It's on page 89. You have two new items. Well, you have more than that, but two in particular items that you're going to be measuring that you haven't measured in the past under facilitating and supporting downtown growth and development. One of them is executing the 2025 downtown plan implementation strategy and tracking the number of significant action plan tasks achieved. Talk about how your staff is going to do that, and how do you measure that then?
Sure. One of the nice outcomes of the plan was we came up with a matrix that identified what we called quick wins, near-term goals, and then long-term goals. And I can't remember the specific number of items in there, but it listed several action items, including, you know, for example, the Main Avenue diet in a different sort of verbiage was talked about in there about improving traffic patterns and pedestrian experience, that sort of thing. So there are, I always hesitate to throw out numbers when I don't know, but I want to say there's about 60 of those action items. And some of them are one-time items, and some of them are items that can happen several times. So our goal is to, in the course of a year, implement 15 of those items. Now, not all of those will be by our office. Actually, quite a few of them are going to be collaboration, which will require us working with different departments, downtown Sioux Falls organization, or oftentimes property owners to do different things downtown.
Well, I think it's important to note that we're not just putting the plan on the shelf, and I appreciate the city staff is getting involved with that. I'm just interested in that idea of, I mean, some of it will just be claiming the list. I mean, yes, this happened, check it off the list, and I acknowledge that. I appreciate that. Do you see those as line items in the budget, or it's just part of your everyday work that we're going to make sure that we're hitting those items as well?
Yeah, I would say, you know, some of those goals are team goals, so some of those might be reflected in the budget as far as the downtown Sioux Falls contribution that the city makes. But I think the way you phrased it is accurate. A lot of that will be part of our internal staff resources, just putting the effort and the elbow grease into implementing some of these projects.
Okay, and one more, I promise. The last one is also, we're looking at outcome-based indicators, page 89. Very bottom item is a new one again that you're measuring. Major neighborhood redevelopment projects to be supported in 2017. Your goal is 2 major redevelopment projects in neighborhoods. Can you talk about what those might be, or do you know what they are?
Yeah, I'll give you a kind of a flavor. I think there are, always opportunities, especially in the core, for redevelopment. And, probably about 5 years ago, we developed a map, and it was probably a map that had been redone from somebody in the past, but just identifying different tracks, particularly downtown, but also the core neighborhoods where there were properties, excuse me, that were well-suited for redevelopment, whether they were dilapidated or whether there were several properties with single ownership looking to redevelop, what have you. So we want to make sure, and I think we've done this in the past, the Catholic Housing Project on 11th Street would be an example that going forward we would check off. So part of that is it being added as a criteria, even though we've done it in the past. But it's projects like that we can go into a neighborhood with a partnership on the private side and look for good projects that add a quality project to the neighborhood, potentially get rid of a property that has police call issues or life safety issues or health issues, and reinvest for the community, for the neighborhood.
Great, good. Thank you very much. I appreciate your report.
You bet. Thank you, Brent. Thank you.
Question.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
One quick
Councilor
question.
Erickson?
Just as we went through this, my question is in regards to last year, we heard a ton of excitement and a lot of talk about the USD Discovery Center.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, I don't see that listed anywhere unless I missed it.
Yeah.
Reason why that was cut, it's my understanding that there's a match between if the city gives X amount of dollars, the state will give X amount of dollars. And if we give 0, the state gives 0, which is kind of a bad deal. So I'm curious if you can expand on that subject a little bit.
Sure. On the matching piece, I believe, and I'm really kind of talking about this year, I believe that there was a matching component where 4 partners came together, the city, Forward Sioux Falls, USD, and the state, to come up with a substantial amount of money, and the city was an investor last year. The city budgeting process last year looked at that as an initiative and a one-time deal that we might reevaluate this year. It was part of the $500,000 workforce dollars last year. $350 was pushed one way and $150 pushed towards the Discovery District. This year, really the budget environment we were under, and the desire to move that workforce dollar to Forward Sioux Falls did make that an omission from the budget this year. We are still continuing to talk to Rich Nazer about, Rich is the executive director, for those that don't know him, out there on ways we can support it. So we're going to continue to have those conversations.
But there's no dollars for next year?
In the budget request, no.
All right, I thank you for that. I know we did increase some funding for Forward Sioux Falls. However, we did increase responsibility as well. It was really quite a wash. It was, hey, here's an extra amount of dollars, and oh, you get to also do, Sioux Falls has jobs as well as a few other things. And so I myself have a little issue with that. I guess we'll continue the conversation to see where we go. My concern is when you've got matching dollars, boy, that's a slam dunk deal. Oftentimes, if you've got 3 other partners willing to come in and put some dollars in as well, it makes that small investment of $150,000 really kind of catapult much larger. And I know they've definitely got needs as well as a lot of other initiatives throughout the community. So thanks for explaining that, and I will be talking to you more about that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you again.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Our last one is Matt Nelson with the parking.
Good afternoon, Matt Nelson, Public Parking Facilities Manager. Just briefly talk about our mission, and our mission for parking is to provide parking in the downtown and help enforce parking ordinance throughout town. The majority of that is done throughout the downtown area, but we also have some support we give throughout all of Sioux Falls, and that would be in some of the time zones and around some of the schools and hospitals. Kind of an overview of what our parking is structured like in the downtown area. The public off-street parking makes up approximately 29% of all of the parking supply in downtown. The public on-street parking makes up approximately 10%, and then the private side holds about 61% of the remaining parking, which is off-street parking. One of the big things that we're different than a lot of departments is we're an enterprise fund. We're treated like a utility, and our goal is to act like a business within city government. Saying that we act like a business is true. Our goal is to turn a profit, but it is not only profits. Our goal is to work with downtown and work with businesses to help develop and grow downtown and provide a good product at a good, fair price. And I believe we certainly do that. So in 2016, what were our major initiatives that we're undertaking? One of our strategies for 2016 and going forward is to invest in our corridors through downtown, which are 10th and 11th Street. The Carnegie parking lot is a major initiative for us. We want to improve our parking facilities, and that one was due for an upgrade, and we've done that, and we're very happy with the way it's turned out. In addition to the parking lot, we also paid for the upgrades to the Carnegie building, which are adjacent to the parking lot, which helps our runoff. So it's a collaborative effort. We've also added smart parking meters in downtown. We've increased our supply from 18% to 30% of smart parking meters. A year ago, we talked about parking pay stations. As we got into the project and did the analysis, we couldn't make pay stations work because we couldn't get the ratio of parking spots to pay stations where it made it cost effective. So now we've turned and gone with more individual smart parking meters, which actually provide a little better convenience for customers, and it's a better value for us as a city and for the citizens. Another initiative is continuing to invest in technology and equipment. That picture on the far right there, that is a computer that is still running in one of our systems. It is a green screen. That is a dot matrix printer that runs paper through it. I'm not sure how it works, but it does. It goes away this year, and we'll be upgrading our equipment. And we also are investing in new iPhones, like our handhelds that you see the parking patrol carry. That will go away. Those are actually very expensive. They're about $4,500 a piece. So every 4 years, we've eliminated a no-step item of about $24,000 by simply going to iPhone. So there's a lot of other technology upgrades that are incorporated with the equipment upgrades and new systems and processes we can implement with that too. So we continue to invest in that. And one of our major initiatives too this last year that we're continuing to work on, and you'll see as we go into 2017, is our new parking facility. For our 2017 budget, our budget remains largely unchanged. There's a few changes that on the expense side that I'd like to touch on. One is that we're going to add a part-time staff member, and you'll see that in our budget expenses. So it's not only, we're not just only adding staff, we're actually reallocating some resources. We do have an accounting person in our department, and with a lot of the automations we've made, a lot of the accounting functions have gone away from parking, and we're going to shift that individual into affordable housing and into finance, and that position will go into finance for 2017 to better use her skills. So we were using her to answer phones, and that's just not a good use of her skills. She's doing a lot of accounting functions too, but now we're going to use a part-time person to do that. You'll also see an increase in some of our operating costs. There were two major initiatives we're looking at. Well, one is an initiative from before. It's credit card fees. Our credit card fees are going up in 2017. We've seen them go up this year, and it's kind of a part of the success of our new software and being able to take online payments for leases and parking tickets. Along with those increased payments come increased fees. The other one is adding a contracted staff person after our normal business hours. So our staff is here typically till 5 p.m. We come in at 6 a.m. We're looking at adding contracted services during our busier months, which are the summers, to help monitor our facilities and help provide customer service to the people that are using those facilities. We're running a pilot this summer still, and we want to see what the revenue that we can comes in with the additional staff in one of our ramps, which is the First Avenue ramp, and see what we can offset. And we want to add a staff person potentially through our busiest months next summer to provide additional service and like I said, monitoring of our facilities. And then next year, the capital of $0.2 million, we are going to invest in the First Avenue ramp, which is often referred to as the bus stop ramp. We are going to make landscape and ADA improvements to the outside of the ramps. We actually cannot do much for repairs on the inside of our facilities because we're maxed out with our occupancy and capacity. So we've got to do our improvements on the outside because that's how full we are at this point. But we're going to partner with the downtown bus stop. They're doing a redesign there. We're doing design work with them and our own contract this year, and then the plan is to bid that next year and to make improvements, once again, along the 10th and 11th Street corridors to improve downtown as you come through. And the big one, obviously, is our mixed-use parking facility, which we've been working on for a couple years now. And as you can see from our occupancy rates, our system is full. We ran our report today. We're actually at 98% occupancy for 2016. So we're bulging. It's making it difficult for us to perform a lot of operations when you talk about maintenance and moving people around and preparing for our peak times and preparing for new people coming downtown. So it's unfortunate that we're that full. I would have liked to have been building a year ago, but this is a situation we've been in the past. And for almost 10 years, we were at a 99, 100% occupancy rate in the system. And now we're there again, but we've got a good plan moving forward, which we're working on now with the new ramp. The biggest difference you're going to see is that final bullet point there, and that's what I want to touch on. So what's different between previous projects and this one? Our process this time, we're going out for a collaborative effort. We are asking not for your ideas to come in, we're asking for you to come in, and we're going to work on our ideas together. And we believe this will provide better cost controls, and it'll provide a better protection of city funds and parking funds, so we can control what the structure looks like, how it's built, and control a lot of the cost. So, and our other initiatives are definitely up there. We've been hearing from the public. Make it walkable, make it a mixed-use development, so that's what we're working towards. So the biggest question is, well, why did the budget change so much in a year? Well, there's a couple reasons. We've got the 2016 and the 2017 budget side by side here, and I'll go through that. But the 2016 number was an industry planning number. It was very a high overview number. We had used a good number. It was 600 spaces times $20,000 a space, and it's laid out in the 2016 CAP plan just like that. It is a good number, but it's not site specific, and it wasn't specific to the plan that we looked at. And our 2017 number is based on a specific conceptual plan, and there are some site-specific changes in there that now we know are there, and we've included those in there. So what you'll see is 2016, we did not have the storm sewer relocation in there. We've added it for 2017. We knew the line was there, but we didn't know how we would pay for it. We budgeted for the parking ramp. We did not budget to move a storm sewer. It's a critical piece to our project, so we are budgeting for it in 2017. In 2016, we plan to only complete the parking ramp portions of the project. Going into 2017, we know there are a lot of what we've called shared use or portioned construction cost, and what those would be, so on the main level, if you would build a parking ramp shell, and somebody has to pay for that shell. So parking, we have the money budgeted where we could build the shell, and then we would look to pay for those expenses or recover them through lease parking. Potentially, it could be a TIF fund or it could be through leases, but we'd be looking to recover those costs. We've included those costs in there. The $17.9 million is also a stacked type construction, so this concept is what I would classify as probably the most expensive type of construction we could do. There are several options out there, but we want to have this cost ceiling available to us, so no matter what project comes forward, we have the ability to complete that project, and this is our ceiling. So hopefully it doesn't cost 17.9, but if it could, and this is, like I said, a cost ceiling. And part of it was a scope change. So there were some site-specific costs. Due to the fractured granite that was below grade after we did some geotechnical exploration, it's recommended that we use a micropile foundation. Costs associated with that are an extra $1.4 million. Underground parking was not part of our original plan. We would have doubled the planning figure for underground parking, and it's at least $1 million more to add underground parking. And then there was a capacity change. So in our concepts that we had, the concept went up to 650 spaces, and we were only planning for 600 spaces. And that extra 50 spaces doesn't seem like a lot, but it's actually $1 million. So it adds up very quickly, and those are the biggest changes in the 2016 and 2017 budget. Well, how will we fund that project? So we believe we've come forward with a conservative funding plan. We do have reserve funds in parking, and we've been saving our funds for years to spend on a new ramp and put a down payment on it. So 3.6% or approximately 20% of the project would be paid with a down payment, and then 14.3 million of those funds would be bonded. Those bonds would have to go through City Council for approval. So even this number, although it's up there, it would still require approval of the City Council. Those bonds may be tax exempt or taxable. Our goal would be tax exempt bonds, but depending on the leases, uses, and the customers in there, we may be required to go to a taxable bond. The graph that I'll show you on the next slide, we're planning for a 15-year term, and we can make that work on a bond. 20 years an option. We've heard both from different consultants. Money is very inexpensive right now, so they say 20 years might be in your interest, but we know we can make 15 years work. We'd asked that this would be backed by the second penny sales tax, and this is to give our citizens and downtown businesses the best rate available. Helps us keep parking rates low for our customers. And once again, we are an enterprise fund, and this would be paid back solely by parking fund revenues. This is just a brief overview to show what our fund would look like at 17.9 million. It is a conservative estimate. We've planned actually on revenue from 550 parking spots. We could build something bigger than that. The red line shows what we would like to keep as a baseline reserve in our fund, and that baseline would be for a major tenant leaving downtown, which we've seen, for a potential economic downturn, for a major repair that may come up, or if there's an emergency in our system. So we do want to keep it above $1 million, and we do that. We actually build up enough cash by approximately 2029 where we could pay that bond off early. But this is what it would look like. We feel like it's a conservative approach, and we feel like we can definitely afford a structure in that price range. With that, I will take any of your questions at this time.
Any questions for Matt? Councilor Starr.
Yep, and I'm not sure, Matt, this is for you, but maybe it's Director Turbeck. How many other enterprise projects do we use as backing from the second penny?
Yeah, good question. That has been done on a number of occasions in the past. The most notable one, I think, is probably the Lewis and Clark water bonds. When the city sold, I believe it was $70 million of bonds that are being repaid with water system revenues. They were also backed by the second penny sales tax, and really for the same reason that we're suggesting that be done here, so that additional security goes a long ways to providing assurance to a bond investor that they're going to get repaid in a timely manner, and so in compensation for that, they're willing to accept a lower interest rate. So it really is an overall win for the city if we can get the lowest possible rate on parking bonds and just utilize that as a second penny revenue as a backstop. Okay. We're confident based on the projections that the parking system can generate the revenue necessary to make the payments, but it's really a good strategic use of those revenues.
Okay, I guess the follow-up to that, if I may, is just that would that make a difference whether we end up having to do these as a taxable versus non-taxable? Does that make a difference in what the bond investor is looking for?
Whether
in the rate?
No, the second penny, whether it's
two,
backed with second penny revenues or not, doesn't have an impact on whether it's taxable or non-tax exempt. That really is driven by how the parking facility will be used. If we're leasing to private businesses space within that, and it can be problematic if it's been financed with tax exempt debt. So the inclination, at least today, is to sell taxable bonds, and then really that frees up the parking system in the future to do whatever makes good business sense for them to do in terms of making the best use of that facility. If it means leasing spaces to a private business, then they can do that without having to worry about violating some sort of IRS rule because the project was financed with tax-exempt bonds.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Councilor Rittenbach?
Thank you. All my questions are for Matt. Thanks,
okay.
Tracy. Matt, how long, with this parking ramp, how long will it be before we need to build another one?
Well, obviously the economy fluctuates constantly, but our initial estimates were saying potentially up to 10 years. And this, after building this, our estimate is that we would take our occupancy around that 85% rate. I think that's in the notes and the OBIs. But yeah, so we're looking at a potentially 10-year solution, and we've talked about that. We've looked at financing options. In the graph, you'll notice that we could potentially pay this off in 12 years to 13 years. So we would be looking to potentially do that. It also means we'd be bringing in more revenue if we filled up faster. So that's a positive too.
Right, exactly. Can you, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around just a little bit. I just have two more questions. One is, can you remind us what a smart parking meter is?
Okay, so I'm sorry, yeah, it's a good question. Smart parking meter is one that does take credit cards, would be how you generally think of it. In addition to that, it has essentially a cell phone in it. It talks to the cell towers, gives us data back, tells us when a meter fails, tells us when batteries are low, tells us if it's jammed, tells us if it's full of quarters. It tells us a lot of stuff, tells us the utilization, the rate, the percentage of credit cards used, the percentage of coins, and I can tell you every dime, nickel, or quarter that goes into a meter at a certain time or transaction.
That's remarkable. Then my last question is about staffing. In the time that I've been on the council, which is just over 6 years, we cut a bunch of staff in parking, the people that worked in the ramps. And now you're telling us that we really need to hire staff, especially on a contract basis during the busy times. Can you talk about that,
Sure.
that thought process? How did we go from, no, we don't need them, to, yeah, we really do?
So we've reduced our staff from 15. When I started, we had 15 FTEs, and one of the projects that we did approximately 5 years ago was automating one of our ramps. And part of that was bringing in automated equipment. We didn't need cashiers anymore. So the cashier position was eliminated, and we lost 3 FTEs as part of that. We've continued to make other automations where we've eliminated the accounting position. We've kind of rearranged tasks as we've had software do that for us. So those positions have been eliminated due to technology, and the positions we're bringing in are a different skill set in a different position, and not to mention they're 5+ years apart. And we're still in a pilot phase. So this contracted security would be a 6-month project. We would look at doing it over the summer months. And the part-time position is one where we don't want to bring it in full-time, because some of the duties they have as we get into some more upgrades with our equipment and technology. I can't promise that we'll need that in 3 or 4 years, so that's why we're looking at part-time.
Good, thank you.
Councilor Kiley.
Matt, our on-street parking makes up about 30% of our available spaces compared to the off-street parking. Where would I find the breakdown of revenue, off-street versus on-street?
Okay, sure. I can provide it. I don't know if we've got it, specifically broken out in here. Jen, do you have those numbers by chance?
I wouldn't need them immediately, and sorry for
We can
asking
certainly
at
provide
once.
those. I know they're lumped together in this report, and I can give you a breakdown of some of them. I can give you a breakdown of the changes, but I would have to pull a report.
Generally, which is, from a city standpoint, which generates a better revenue source, the on-street or the off-street?
By far, the off-street. Let me,
More constant source of revenue?
Yes, let me, I'll go over our 16 budget. This monthly, we do financial reports, and we just had our meeting this morning with our parking board. We've gone over this budget with them. So for year-to-date for 2016, our budget for meters is $336,000 for meter revenue, and our lot and ramp revenue is projected at $1.45 million. So what is that, 4 times, 5 times roughly?
Sure. So if the on-street's at 30%, then that's reflects that your off-street is definitely more profitable. What about in terms of maintenance? I'm on-street versus off-street, a little more maintenance heavy for your ramps and off-street parking.
So there's a few different ways to look at it. So yeah, there is more maintenance off-street because we do all the snow removal, we do the maintenance equipment. I have staff dedicated to doing maintenance and cleaning in our facilities on a daily basis. On-street, I don't have as many, some of that staff, if there's a meter issue, they go out and deal with the meter issue. But we also have to have parking patrol, which ties into the ticketing and citations. So you can put a meter on street, but if no one enforces it, then it doesn't work. So that's where the parking patrol come in. And so you probably have to attribute some of the cost of maintaining as the enforcement also.
And over the last year and a half, how has the Main Street road diet affected the on-street parking revenue?
So for 2017, we're budgeting for approximately 70,000, a little more than 70,000 in revenue being returned to the parking system. So the impact was probably about a negative 70,000 over the past year, year and a half.
Have we reinstalled the parking meters now on the main street? Or?
Yep, this week they are all installed. I think they all went in Friday. And yep, so they're all in.
Plus we gained additional parking space as a result of the diagonal parking, correct?
Yes, so we've calculated that in, and that's how we figured that out.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Seeing no other questions, I have a couple very quickly. You indicated that on the new parking ramp that they're looking at, now you're adding underground parking at $1 million. It can be a little hard to get the money back on that, isn't it?
Well, to be honest, to get the money back on any of the facility, just on a facility, is difficult. We use our system to pay for parking. That is the way the model was built and the way we've done it for years. So, you know, First Avenue, 8th and Dakota, they're all paid off. River Ramp was paid off, and it was a cash cow for years. So we use that revenue to help.
That's not my question. Why are we putting in?
So they're all difficult, but underground parking is also considered a premium level parking, and with the last increases that were approved, that is charged at 1.5 times market rate. So we do recover more revenue from the underground parking, and it also helps in helping with the private development that may require underground parking and puts items back on the tax roll.
Okay. Secondly, on page of the capital report, page 155, parking lot and ramp improvements, $400,000. This project will accommodate unanticipated capital activities as well as other improvements to provide a more secure environment.
Sorry, my page.
Can you give us a little bit more on that?
Okay, so my pages are not numbered. I don't have that one with me. Which?
Okay. Well, it's your CIP.
So you're looking at which dollar amount? The
100,000.
Oh. Okay.
I'm sorry. Say it again. Okay. Yeah. Department Priority 1. Project Priority 1.
Oh, I'm sorry. So 400,000 threw me. So 400,000 is it's a total of all the years. So for 2017, which is the funded year, we're looking at $155,000 in the capital improvement.
Yep.
That would be the north and south sides of the First Avenue ramp. That would be the landscape and ADA improvements.
Okay. If you could next time, when you put that together, give us a little bit more here.
Sure.
So that we know it's, you know, a little bit more description so we know what's going on with that.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much, Matt. Good job. Do we,
I think as long as we're making suggestions, may I make one? With the slides, is it possible to number the slides so when we're, as counselors, referencing a slide instead of a page number? Because it'll take you directly to where we're at if we have each slide numbered. That'd be great. Table of contents in this budget book would be wonderful, too.
Yeah. I want to thank you all for being here, helping us understand the budget. We are not accountants. We are not, actuaries or anything like that. And so it helps to be able to go through this with you and ask some questions. We do very much appreciate it. And I know that many of us are going out to the National Night Out, so I will adjourn this meeting.